Cinemoddities! Late night movies with Rob and Zack. This is a podcast about cinematic oddities where we discuss any media that is too bizarre, abnormal, or off-kilter for contemporary audiences. Occasionally, these projects gel. Most times they crash hard into the realm of obscurity. Join us as we delve into the cult classic swamp. I'm Zack.
And ignorance is our ammunition. This is a very special episode because, as everybody knows, we live in a time vortex world and there's no Zack at dusk. But it's not dusk this time. It is bright as day, new movie, in theaters. We're all excited about it. And Zack is here, but I think he's inverted. Is that the case? That this is kind of, you saw it 50 years ago and we recorded this, 20 years ago or something like that? Can we even parse through how time is working right now, or is that just a futile endeavor?
What happened was I recruited Rob to Cinemoddities 20 years into the future when he's Vernon Chapman. And now we're finally at the cross point. We are at the Tenet point as we interlock our fingers. And we're both simultaneously blowing up the restaurant and rebuilding it at the same time.
That's what I was about to say. The restaurant, the bottom of the restaurant is exploding while the top is rebuilding. Exactly.
Yes.
Oh, man. So I think this is just, we have to get into it. This is all about Tenet, Christopher Nolan's new film. We got to see it in theaters. It was the first time in months that either of us have been to theaters.
It's probably the longest time I've not been to a movie theater in my entire life, like prior to being a child.
Oh, yeah, that's a good... For Zack, it was from birth to the first time he went to the movie theaters, and then from last time to Tenet. What was the last time? Cats you went to the theater?
No, Uncut Gems.
Uncut Gems, that's right. That
time where I got to see Adam Sandler like in a neck brace talking to Jason Bateman in a diner. Hard to believe that's the last time I was in a movie theater. If only I knew in that moment, folks. On February 12th, that would be the last time before the world blew up. Remember, folks, you ever see Adam Sandler in a neck brace? That's an omen that something bad's going to happen to all of us. Just make note of it. It might be important later on. Okay. So I think this is going to be, we'll probably break it up. I think like we've done with other new movies that we've discussed, how infrequently it comes around, where we'll kind of talk about the movie in general, and then I'm sure we'll get into spoilers and stuff like that, even though I kind of, I think this, I don't know if there's a lot of spoilers for this movie. I could literally give away the ending to this movie right now, and it would not mean anything to anybody who hasn't seen it.
Yes, that is a very good point.
I'm going to give away the ending right now, and no one's going to care, because I have context, it makes no sense. The protagonist, Quicksilver dismantles a giant metal log thing, gives it to the protagonist and Robert Pattinson, and says, go to different corners. That's the ending, right, Rob?
yeah. And
that doesn't mean anything. That literally means nothing.
The only way I would improve that, I think, is that the protagonist takes apart the algorithm. Because the giant metal log that Zack described is the algorithm.
Yes, it is. And the algorithm is in 9 parts, but for some reason they split it into 3, which okay. Like I said, Rob, I think we could literally break down the plot of this and it wouldn't make any difference, because when you're watching this movie, you will not be able to hear a single line of dialogue.
Okay. So I think I wanted to start. There's so much, of course. We got Rob and Zack together talking about Christopher Nolan. I think that's where I want to start. I believe, Zack, this is the first Christopher Nolan movie we're focusing on Cinemoddities ever, right?
Yeah. Now that I think about it,
they've all come up tangentially. Like we've talked about Inception, Interstellar, Dark Knight. I think like Memento has probably popped up for some reason, but this is the first one we're actually focusing on. And to that point, one of my issues with Tenet, I really wish this movie was called Inversion, because as everybody knows, every single Christopher Nolan movie starts with the letter I. We would have Inversion, Inception, Interstellar, Insomnia, In the Dark of the Night, In the Dark of the Night Rises, I Left My Heart in Dunkirk, In the Beginning of Batman, In Mementorium. What am I missing? Oh God, what's one for the...
No, The Prestige.
I Deserve the Prestige. That's what Christopher Nolan would say, right? And then I guess I'm following.
Yes.
So I did want to mention, because I think I said to Zach before we saw Tenet, I was trying to watch all of Christopher Nolan's movies before seeing Tenet, and I did not accomplish this task. I did not watch Batman Begins because I just did not want to see it. I did not watch Dunkirk again because I was like, I've seen it once. I'm good. And I have to say, though, Zach, I watched the first hour of Interstellar.
The best part of Interstellar, that doesn't include the Tesseract.
And all the others, though, I did go back to. Some, I just kind of watched passively with on in the background. Before we get into Tenet, I did want to ask you, Zach, because I don't think we've ever talked about it before, together, on recording or not. Have you ever seen Insomnia?
Yeah, I saw it back when when you and I had our hard on for Inception.
Okay, so I saw it a while ago, and I remember I didn't really care for it. On this rewatch, I actually really enjoyed it. What are your thoughts on Insomnia, if you remember anything about it?
I've not watched it in over 10 years. I remember not liking it. I remember I find it a very frustrating movie. Much like the end, I think Al Pacino goes insane by the end, and that's kind of how I was feeling. Yeah, I do. Again, it's been 10 years. I'm a very different person as a film goer since then, so maybe I would like it. Because that's Al Pacino, Robin Williams,
Hilary Swank.
That's who it was.
Yep.
I was gonna say Michelle Rodriguez. I'm like, there's no way Michelle Rodriguez is in a Christopher Nolan film. Yeah, it's Hilary Swank. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not. I was actually surprised. That was one of the ones I thought that I was going to be on, but it was better than I expected. So
I guess
yeah.
One thing I want to give our audience, because we've never talked about Christopher Nolan directly, and I guess to give the audience a little bit of context, I think we should give what our favorite Christopher Nolan film is. Not the best, but what our favorite is.
Okay.
I think the audience knows already what mine is because Rob just constantly brings it up.
And I think if you're an astute listener to Cinemoddities, you know what my favorite is. But of course, mine is Inception. I figured
Inception, but mine is Interstellar.
Yes.
The greatest space movie ever made.
I have to say, I think it's been said on this podcast before, but especially rewatching Inception prior to seeing Tenet, which I maybe it's been like a year and a half since I saw Inception. I know Zach and we have our disagreements about both Inception and Interstellar. I know Zach likes to say Inception is the movie that just stops dead in its tracks to explain things. I love that aspect about it, and I really appreciate that Inception, I have started to understand it as Christopher Nolan explains things for 2 hours so you can appreciate 4 minutes of a van falling off a bridge. That is a bodybuilder of a movie. He does so much work to make a shot of a slow motion van make sense, and I really appreciate that.
If only he applied that same principle to Tenet. If only. This is the opposite. Tenet is the inversion of that. If only he had devoted as much time in Tenet as he did in Inception to explaining time to help us appreciate a van falling off a bridge, that we could appreciate two guys running into an art gallery in an airport lounge as a plane crashes into it. Same amount of time is devoted to it all. If only we understood the importance of it.
Oh, absolutely. So anything you want to say about Interstellar? We won't get into, I won't fight with you too much, but,
No, I got nothing.
Okay.
Like I said, I think it's just a matter of giving people a perspective where we're coming from.
Sure.
I think that's all it is. I think if you like Interstellar, you know where I'll be coming from. Mm-hmm. And if you like Inception, you know where Rob is coming from. I think it's just a matter, give the audience a bearing on us.
Yeah, that's fair. So like I said, we both got to see this in theaters, not together. This wasn't an Avengers Endgame experiment or anything like that. But probably, we both braved the theaters. Probably by the time, this comes out and you're listening to it, or maybe you're listening to this episode after you've seen Tenet, who knows when that is. Zach and I are both dead. We have the COVID.
Yes. We're quarantining right now, and by the time you're hearing this, we are both muerte.
Yeah, at the time of this recording, I saw it a little less than a week ago. My sense of smell is gone. I can barely breathe. So we're just.
I'm recording this live through a respirator, much like our characters in the film.
Yes. They put masks on in the film. It's so relatable.
Okay, we'll get to that because that drove me nuts. Again, there's a lot. Okay.
Oh yeah, there is. Yes. So I guess like I was trying to set up. We saw it in theaters. I figured we'd want to talk about not only our theater going experiences, but the return to a theater, like we were mentioning. And I have to say that I absolutely loved it. You know, I not only wanted to see Tenet, I wanted to go back to a theater, and I got to see it with Justin and Heather. Justin, who couldn't make it today, I think a little later on we'll put in a blurb of his thoughts, but I got to see it with them, and before we went to see the movie, I said to Justin, you know, I want one thing more than anything out of this movie. I want it to be ungodly loud. Because I love loud. I've been dying, you know, not seeing movies in theaters, not being able to go to concerts and have my eardrums blown out during this whole, you know, quarantine and stay-at-home stuff. I wanted this movie to be loud, and oh man, did I get that. I got it so much. And there was like some parts right at the beginning of the movie, I think like Heather was like covering her ears, and I'm just like, take it all in, man. Like, damage my eardrums. I was just reveling in it.
There are only two tragedies in life: not getting what you want and getting what you want. This is definitely the latter of that.
So I definitely enjoyed the theater going experience. There was, you know, definitely some social distancing, but I think Zack will get into that more with his experience, because like I said, I saw it with other people, so I had to sit next to Justin the whole time, and he smells weird. But other than that, it was fine. You know, there wasn't too crowded. I think they weren't selling too many tickets to where I saw it in Fort Collins. But overall, it was a good return to the theater experience, as far as I'm concerned. I don't know the next time it'll happen. So Zack, how was yours? Do you have something to complain about? Because remember, not only on Cinemoddities, but Nights of Vader, there's always a problem, whether it be people chewing too loud, or what the people doing sign language erratically constantly in front of you.
Oh yeah, that was a thing that happened. I always try. There needs to be a special column in the spreadsheet of Zack's movie going experiences.
So how did it go this time?
Well, it should be noted that I did not, because I live in the horrible, horrible state of New York, and everything is still shut down because we have an emperor, not a governor. And so I had to drive an hour to Connecticut to go see this movie. But it was worth it because I got to go see it in IMAX. So imagine what Rob heard at level 10 dialed up to 11.
Oh, yeah.
And so, to be fair, only bad things happen at the Galleria movie theater. That's the place where, like, everybody who's a horrible audience member, they flock to that theater. And they always know the exact showing and time I'm going to. So I drove an hour to Connecticut. Because of like, I guess, reserved seating, I didn't have to worry about anything. But then I knew, because when I first told Rob about this, because I found out about this and told Rob about it. I'm like, Rob, Tenet's gonna be in theaters like in 4 days, and he's like, what? And I'm like, yeah. And so, like, they originally released this as like a preview screening for like August 31st, September 1st, and 2nd. I tried getting tickets to every single one of those, and I couldn't, because the seat that I would find ideal was always unavailable, not because somebody bought it, but bought that particular seat, but because if like one person bought a seat, the entire theater shut down, or the entire like auditorium was booked out. And so I was like, nope, I'm not driving an hour and spending $20 to get a seat that I don't want. So I ended up seeing it yesterday at 8:45 at night in the seat I wanted. And folks, social distancing is horrible. It doesn't do anything. It's a waste of time. All these rules aren't going to save you. But when it comes to the movie-going experience, social distance is the greatest goddamn thing that has ever happened to Zachary. And this is not a joke, because I got my seat, and I basically had a buffer of like 2 seats all around me, both forward, behind, left, and right. Nobody came near me. It was delightful. Like, in all honesty, if this is the silver lining to COVID in social distancing, I'll take it. I love this. I don't want this to end when it comes to the movie-going experience, because I didn't have to worry about any mouth breather up my ass.
Yep.
And I have to say, my theater was pretty full. It was an IMAX showing on a Friday night, so that's not too surprising for like one of the first big movies. I guess we're not counting Unhinged and New Mutants as big movies. So no, it was pretty full, and I don't have any complaints actually about the movie going experience, other than like I walked in, they made me like change the stupid thing I had around my mouth. But that's just a symptom of the times. Nothing really for that particular theater. But no, I I was happy. I guess I should say, because obviously I have not been on Cinemoddities in months, that where I work, I actually work right next to the infamous Galleria movie theater, and it kills me that after all the years I had to beg, borrow, and steal to get to that movie theater, I literally work within walking distance of it, and I cannot go to a movie.
Yep.
It kills me, folks. It genuinely kills me. But maybe one day our illustrious supreme leader of New York will actually allow the movie theaters to reopen. But just one thing I do want to say about this all like stupid social distancing, all the dumb rules we have now, is that I find it fascinating that they force you to wear a mask throughout the runtime of the movie. But if you're eating or drinking, they allow you to take it off, which I find fascinating because when you're eating and drinking, you are spraying millions upon millions of little particles of saliva into the air, inherently negating the effects of wearing a mask as you breathe through your nose. I don't get it. I know in the pre-recording, Rob and I discussed it. He doesn't get it. But any sort of false sense of a security blanket that helps you sleep at night, fine. But just know that it's not doing you any favors. So with that being said, I have nothing else to say about my theater going experience other than one mouth breather that every single time something happened in the film that related to something that happened earlier, he physically like fingered the screen. And that happened at least, I'd say, I don't know, 8 to 10 times.
Okay.
Other than that, respectful audience. Nobody guffawed. Nobody giggled at everything. It
Right
really
on.
was, like, in all honesty, to be fair, maybe somebody could have been laughing at the screen. It was just so loud that there's a possibility that I didn't hear it.
Sure.
To be fair, I couldn't hear the actors in the movie talk, so why would I hear the people in the theater talk? So, yeah. Christopher Nolan, folks, he's made a dozen movies, and he still doesn't know how to properly mix the audio.
Oh, yeah. I guess, speaking of that and the loudness, I definitely had some issue hearing certain things in the movie, but it wasn't as bad as I was expecting. Like, I guess we'll get into it as we go through more of the movie, but, you know, there was definitely, you know, a good portion of this movie where I was like, okay, I understand things, I know what they're doing, why they're doing them, and then there's a certain scene where the movie just, like, takes a huge left turn, and I'm just like, I have never been more confused in my life.
Yep.
But I guess we have to say, since new movie right off the bat, new Christopher Nolan as well, Zack and I are fresh off of it. Zack's a little fresher than I am. Well, what did we think? Zack, what did you think of Tenet now that it's fresh in your head?
All right. I've been thinking long and hard about this. I actually came up with this analogy about halfway into the movie.
Okay.
And considering that we're the purveyors of a restaurant that totally exists in Times Square, this is how I've described Tenet. Tenet is like a cake that you're baking in your oven, and you put the batter in, you mix it, you put it into the cake pan, you put it into the oven, you let it cook in the oven for, I don't know, 5 minutes, take it out just to the point where the outside is formed, then you put it together. But the moment you do anything to even slightly like cut into it, it's just globs of uncooked cake mix.
Okay.
So, like, and you eat it because it looks good. Like, you're like, okay, like, sure, the inside is barely cooked, but it can't be that bad. And as you're eating it, it's mush. Like, it's not formed at all, but it tastes fine. It tastes like a cake. And that's what this movie is. Like, from the outside, it looks very pretty, but the moment you bite into it or do anything to even slightly kind of just play with it, it falls apart. But it gives you what you want. Like, you want a bite of something sugary sweet, and it gives you that.
That is a really good analogy. I like it, and I say that I would agree. When the movie ended, I was kind of conflicted because, one, I think it's one of the most visually enthralling things I've ever seen. Like, I loved a lot of the visuals, I loved a lot of the action, and I was really, really into watching this movie. But at the same time, the premise of inverting objects and the ways that they describe it and what they do, I would describe as incredibly goofy. And I was so conflicted because I could not stop watching it, and I loved watching it. But at the same time, I think this goes to your cake analogy. I was just like, every time they tried to explain something about this technology of inversion, I was just starting to question it. But you're right. I think the way I was thinking about it is, every time you started to get bogged down or started to think about, the maybe logistics or the fundamentals or the background on time travel and the way this movie does it with inversion, the movie knows to switch back to an action scene. Like, this is, how we said don't think about it for the Marvel movie? This is like the don't worry about it movie, I would say. Like, Christopher Nolan's like, don't worry about it. It's fine.
But this is the problem with this movie, though, is that, like, this movie, like, on a screenwriting level, feels like a spec script written by a first-year screenwriting student.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. That this movie, like it's like a first-year college student wrote it. That's exactly what I was thinking, because every time there's some explanation, it's just like, once again, Christopher Nolan is like, yeah, here's some big words people vaguely know, and we can just make it work. Like, the movie, more so than I was expecting, very quickly introduces the technology of inversion and explains it when Science Lady shows up. And Science Lady, there's only like 4 women in this movie. One of them is Science Lady, and Science Lady tells us that they think inversion is a type of radiation that reverses an object's entropy. And immediately I'm like, entropy is a measurement. That's like saying you're inverting something's length. That makes no sense. So Christopher Nolan is just, and then Robert Pattinson is describing what the algorithm does, and he's just like, yeah, quantum entanglement time conflicts and it blows up, and it's not good, And I'm like, oh my god, this is like...
What's the algorithm do? 241 is one section of it. 1 out of 9. It's a formula, rendered into physical form so it can't be copied or communicated. It's a black box with one function, which is... inversion, not objects or peoples, the world around us.
I don't understand.
As they invert the entropy of more and more objects, the 2 directions of time becoming more intertwined. Because the environment's entropy flows in our direction, we dominate. They're always swimming upstream. It's what saved your life. The inverted explosion was pushing against the environment, pissing in the wind. And the algorithm can change the direction of that wind. It can invert the entropy of the world.
If that happens.
Oh. End of play.
This is like you said, a college kid wrote it, and that's why I was conflicted, because it's so goofy. I don't want to say stupid. I don't think it's stupid because, of course, inversion doesn't exist. And Christopher Nolan, as we learned from Inception, he feels the need, and The Prestige, he feels the need to describe the way science fiction things work. He's not the person that just goes by it. He always needs to jam in some explanation. So I don't want to call it stupid, I call it goofy.
I don't think it's stupid. I think the execution is... Okay, I agree it's goofy, but I think the execution of it is stupid. I think stupid's a very ineloquent word to use.
Yeah.
But it's stupid because he's trying to explain it. John David Washington's our main character.
Yes.
And a couple times
Jr., yeah.
Yes. And so he'll sit there, like, blink at the screen and be like, what? And Robert Pattinson will be like, don't worry about it. And I'm like, that's such a cop-out of an answer. And I'm like, that's what I don't get, though. Like, this is the same guy. And Rob made fun of me for this. A couple of weeks ago, I was talking to him about Inception. And I'm like, Rob, there's a point in Inception where you were 2 hours into the movie, and Leonardo DiCaprio literally pulls the emergency brake to describe to Ellen Page what something's happening 2 hours into the movie.
Yes.
And I'm like, and I'm thinking about that while watching this movie. And I'm like, how is this the same person? How is this the same person 10 years later who, like, even though I make fun of Inception for all its expository, like, hard stops, there's nothing confusing about Inception. Like, Inception lays everything out maybe a little too much, but there's nothing confusing about it at the end of the day.
Sure.
Other than the intentionally ambiguous ending. And this is like, you're watching this and, like, nothing makes sense. It's not explained properly. And when they do try to explain it, the sound mixing is so horrible. You just have to give up halfway through and just be like, it doesn't matter. Things are going backwards.
Yeah.
Up until a point where they actually have to start color coding the people going forward and backwards to make you understand it. It's like, oh, red means forward, blue means backwards. To the point where certain characters have red watches, other ones have blue watches, other ones are in rooms lit with red light, other ones are in rooms lit with blue light, other ones have like red patches, other ones have blue patches. And I'm like, I get it, like show not tell.
Yep.
I respect that. But you can't then have expository breaks that end with, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, no, F this. I'm like, it's like, I don't get it. Like, this is the same guy that made Dunkirk. And even though I'm not thrilled with Dunkirk as a movie, I respect the fact that he's able to weave all those narratives into one, like, streamlined plot thread by the end of the film.
Yeah.
And yet you have this where just nothing connects neatly. And it's like, and I'm not sure, maybe it's because I need to rewatch it a few more times. Maybe if I could understand a single thing the character said, I would be able to understand the plot better. Like Rob and I were joking before this, like we were talking about like movies that we would like spend $20 for like a VOD experience, kind of like Mulan or Bill and Ted 3. Yeah. And I was like, I would easily have spent $20 for a subtitle track to be placed over the movie halfway through. But no, I going back to the plot device, the science fiction-y plot device. I think to call it half baked would be kind. I think somebody had an idea for, let's do time travel in an unconventional way, and they just said, the hell with it, we'll figure it out as we go along, and never devoted even a fraction to the amount of time that they devoted to like the dream machine that they did in Inception, which I don't even think we're not even told what the dream machine is in Inception. It's just like, oh, it's a dream machine. They don't even give it a name.
The most they tell us is that like the military developed it for training, but there's no like there's no explanation of, you know, what chemicals are in there, how it works, type of thing. It's just that it, you know, it exists and exists for these reasons, and then when you're in the dream, these are the way things work.
That's what it is, though. But like, you watch Inception and the mechanics of the world are explained.
Yes.
And yet I would rather, like, even though when it comes to filmmaking, it's always show, not tell, I would rather have a movie over-explain its intricacies than just not explain them. And when it does explain them, just tell you, don't worry about it, and then dial up the sound mixing up to 11.
Well, I think the thing that blew me away is, you know, when I was thinking about these exact same things that you're describing, Zach, after I saw the movie. Like I said at my intro at the start of this, they say many times in this movie, ignorance is our ammunition. And I just imagine that Christopher Nolan is trying to explain this movie to people, and he's saying that to them, like in the writing room, in the pitch meetings. And to further that, I was blown away after seeing this movie. I made this connection when I was talking to Justin afterwards. When Neil, so Robert Pattinson, is describing his plan to drive the plane into the hangar to our main character, and they go to what's his name, the fixer. I don't remember his name in the movie, but like the three of them are talking about, you know, how they're going to fly this plane into the hangar, and the fixer's like, oh, we're going to do this to get the crew off, we're going to drop these gold bars so they think it's like a heist or something, and all this stuff, all this exposition of the plan. And our main character says to them, that's bold. And the fixer says, I'll take bold. I thought you were going to say nuts. Christopher Nolan had to say that to a producer at some point, where he explains this movie and the producer goes, this seems bold. And he goes, bold is good. I thought you were going to say I'm crazy.
Yeah, I that's the thing about this movie, is that like, as I was watching it, a couple of times, not that you zone out, but like stuff happens that like, there's a part where there's a word for it's a sport. I don't know what it's called, when they're on the sail thingy, and they're it's Kenneth Branagh, John David Washington, and whatever her name is. She was in Great Gatsby.
Yeah, Elizabeth Debicki. Yep.
And they're doing something. I couldn't hear a single word they were saying. I could not hear a single word they were saying. So I started
that scene.
I started to tune out, and I started to think, I'm like, if COVID-19 didn't happen, and this got released as like the big like Warner Brothers tentpole like at the end of July, I'm like, there's no way this movie would have clicked with audiences. I'm like, there's no way. Like, everybody forgets that, like, we all, like, it's like, I know Rob and I have talked about it a little bit. I know at one point before I decided to go MIA, we were going to do a summer 2010 series. And I was really, like, again, I think back to Inception, and how much money that movie made that summer 10 years ago.
Yep.
And that movie, like, it made money, but like it didn't like worldwide it did really well. But like domestically, it made less money than like Alice in Wonderland. It made less money than Toy Story 3. Like it did not like in the US and I guess Canada, because that's considered North America, that movie did not make as much money as people remember it did.
Mm-hmm.
And like there's no way this movie, and that's why this movie's not getting really, it's getting good reviews because it's a Christopher Nolan movie, but it's not getting as glowing reviews as your Dunkirks, your other films, because it's a very inaccessible film.
Oh yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, and so like I know Rob and I were talking before we saw this. We're like, oh, isn't it interesting? Like kind of like the dichotomy of like Warner Brothers is taking their big like tentpole and they're throwing it into a very uncertain box office arena, whereas Disney is like doing an equally audacious thing, but in a very different direction. We're like, we're going to take Mulan, our $200 million film, and we're going to put it on our streaming service and see what happens. Mm-hmm. Both are very, very audacious maneuvers, but in two distinct different directions. And yet with Tenet, I think it's much less audacious than what Disney's doing with Mulan, because I don't think Tenet was ever going to break out.
Yeah. It's I from what I've been reading, you know, it seems to be very polarizing, which makes a lot of sense given the nature of the movie, as we've been describing, as I'm sure we'll describe more. And I totally agree with you that, you know, this is something that even, you know, for like Justin, Heather, and I, you know, we enjoyed it, I think, for the most part, but the big thing was like we would need to see that again to even begin to follow some of those scenes.
And I think that might be the plan that Warner Brothers is thinking about with this, is that it's a movie that's going to beg for repeat viewings. Mm-hmm. So maybe they felt like putting this into theaters is the inaugural film I don't know if we can say post-COVID, but post-quarantine, that maybe it'll get a lot of repeat viewings and it's going to ease people. You'll get the fanatics like Rob and I that will go out no matter what.
Yep.
And then we'll go back and bring friends that are a little bit more hesitant to be like, oh, no, everything's fine. And that's maybe the way they'll ease people back into the water. So when Wonder Woman comes out, hopefully the next month or two, that will make them that'll be more of a slam dunk as opposed to what this will do. But getting back to just like how the plot and mechanics of Tenet, I remember back when Rob and I had our major hard on for Inception right after high school. I remember there was an interview with Christopher Nolan, and he's like, I don't think people give audiences enough credit for figuring out intricate plots. And with Inception, I get why that might be jarring to some people, but I think as long as you pay attention in Inception, nothing's going to go over your head. You just have to be very engaged with the plot.
Yeah.
And then I don't know what happened to Christopher Nolan after Inception, because that was right after Inception was Dark Knight Rises, and that's when he had this weird thing with Tom Hardy in the sound mixing where he deliberately made Tom Hardy like inaudible. Mm-hmm. And Inception, he didn't do that in Inception. He didn't do that in The Dark Knight. He didn't do that in The Prestige. He didn't do that in Batman Begins. Yet starting with The Dark Knight Rises, pretty much every single one of his films has I'm going to turn the sound mixing and editing up and drown out the dialogue.
Yep.
And I don't get why he does that. And I remember reading in interviews with The Dark Knight Rises, he's like, oh, I want Bane's actions to communicate his intentions more than his words. And I'm like, if that's the case, then don't have him talk.
Yeah, exactly. I don't get it either, because, you know, like you said, you know, he says audiences don't get enough credit for being able to figure out complicated plots. That might be true, but you can't give them something that they're not going to hear, because people are going to think they're supposed to hear it. And I think that's the complaint from a lot of people, where they're like, well, if there is dialogue, I should be able to understand it, right?
Exactly. And I don't get why he keeps doing this. And again, it'd be one thing like if he was a filmmaker that believed that you can watch stuff on television, but he's one of these people that believes in the theater going experience. He's one of the few. He's up there with Jimmy C as in like the theater going experience is everything. Mm-hmm. And yet he's making it very difficult to appreciate his films in a theater. Like, I know I will inevitably buy this on Blu-ray at some point, and I will never watch this film without the subtitle track.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is that, like, he's making it very hard to do that, because, like, if somebody wanted to go see this movie, I would tell them, like, again, I went and spent the $20 for the IMAX experience, and I would not go back and see this in IMAX. I would go and see this possibly, like, in the worst theater for bass I could find, and that's how I would want to see it. Because a properly calibrated audio system, I don't want to say kills this movie, but it drowns out the exposition, and that is the bane, pardon the pun, of this film's existence.
Yeah, you are not wrong. Like I said, I think I had it a little better than Zack from the IMAX, non-IMAX experience, but you are definitely not wrong. It was still present when I saw it, and I think it was most present, the two cases that I can think of, the opening scene when everybody has gas masks on. Like, I remember, I think the main character rescues the dude, and then there's just two people in gas masks talking, and it's like, and then they open a box, and there's another box in it, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then, and then there's the scene that I want to talk a lot about, but there's the scene where everybody's going forwards and backwards at the same time, and like you're hearing forward dialogue and reverse dialogue, and honestly I could not tell which was which. And this is after the car chase scene, when they do probably my new favorite thing, the stupidest name I've ever heard, but I absolutely love it, the temporal pincer movement.
Yes.
That scene, I had no fucking idea what anybody was saying. I had no clue what was happening, and I couldn't look away.
That's the thing about this movie, is that, like, it really is like an underbaked cake, because, like, if you really want, again, like, we're starved for cake right now.
Yes.
And guess what? We had it. It was just mush. But at the end of the day, it's there. It's sugar, flour. It's all the mixings. It's just not in a form that's ideal. But beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah, and that's I think that's kind of an issue, but like you said, like we've both been saying, we're starved for this stuff, and I guess just to finish off, I did say I was conflicted. I have had, a little, maybe 4 or 5 more days since Zack has to stew on this. I still think it's goofy, I still think it's great, but I'm slowly coming around to love it, and I don't want to jump the gun. I think this might be, as we were saying before recording, a true Cinemoddities movie, and I think I love it for that reason.
100%. 100%. Like, no, there's, like, that's the thing, is that, like, I'd have to rewatch this again. I know for a fact that I don't love this. Like, I walked out of Interstellar, like, high. Like, I was just like I fell in love with Interstellar. I still love Interstellar to this day. That will always be the Christopher Nolan opus to me. But this was just like, the ideas are there.
Yep.
Like, this film needed to spend at least another 6 months to a year going through just draft upon draft until they could get all the bugs out. And that's the thing, is that, like, I was always interested in this movie, but I didn't know anything about it. And I kind of deliberately stayed in the dark about it for many reasons. And then, like, the final trailer came out. It was really cool. It's like you have like all this weird stuff happening. You have people going forward. You have stuff going backwards.
Yep.
You have, like, a woman saying, like, the people in the future need us. I'm like, okay, that's cool. You have the idea of, you're not shooting the gun, you're catching the bullet. And I'm like, that's great. I'm like, I've always been a sucker for movies that have rules, that have their own, like, intrinsic logic to them.
Sure.
And then you get to this movie, and it begins great. You have the opera house sequence where you have all this stuff going on. I'm like, okay, I'm on board. Can't hear a single thing that's going on other than just loud, but I'm on board. Like, this is great. And then, like, we're on a boat, and we're explaining, like, oh, if you're ever in trouble, just, like, interlace your fingers and say Tenet. And it's like, okay. And then, like, 5 minutes later, he's, like, in a giant sea windmill, and he's just, like, working out. And then, like, they give him a vest, and they give him a car. Then he goes into, like, a research facility, and he tries entering a code, doesn't work. And science lady's like, a clipboard, a vest will get you in a lot of places, but not here. And he's like, Tenet.
Yes.
And she, like, and I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm like, this is schlock. Like, this is schlock. Like, this is like Roger Corman schlock.
Yes, yeah. And like I said, I think that's why I'm growing to love it in this weird, goofy way.
But that's the thing, though, is that, like, if it's, like, schlock, it's way too, like, that's the thing. You can make fun of Roger Corman schlock as much as you like. It's straightforward.
Yeah,
this is not straightforward at all, because then, like, Robert Pattinson shows up as not Bruce Wayne, and like I was convinced, like, halfway through this, I'm like, I am so excited for the Batman. I'm like, I was always excited for that because, like, I just loved, like, how weird that, from what little I've seen of that movie so far or what they've released, I'm like, this looks different. In a way that, like, they don't know what to do with Batman anymore, so they're just letting someone have their own take with it. And I'm like, oh, this is how Robert Pattinson became Batman. The executives looked at dailies for this, and they're like, oh, he's a suave man with a nice chin.
Yep.
Boom. And that's what happened. Like, that's all it took for him to get Batman, was because he looked suave and he had a good persona.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Exactly. And I'm like, I'm excited for the Batman now. I'm like, that's why I started thinking, like, okay, I look forward to that.
It makes me think of that scene in The Dark Knight when some person holds the napkin above Aaron Eckhart's eyes, and they go, "Is Harvey Dent the Cape Crusader?" And it's like, that's all you need is the chin.
That's all you need to be Batman. And so again, like, this stuff keeps happening, and like, at one point I was watching this, I'm like, oh, this is Inception, but instead of it being Leonardo DiCaprio and Ellen Page, it was Tom Hardy and Ellen Page. And then it's like, oh, wait, Robert Pattinson doesn't know the rules of this world, because he's like, at one point, John David Washington's like, oh, I'm going to have to kill you for knowing all this. And I'm like, what? I'm like, that's a weird thing to say to the second person in this movie who's supposed to be, like, the person that knows how to, like, arrange everything. Then, like, we find out that, like, oh no, Robert Pattinson this whole time has been, like, the orchestrator of all this.
Yeah.
And then Aaron Taylor Johnson shows up out of freaking nowhere. And then at the end we find out, I guess spoilers, that, like, Robert Pattinson's been orchestrating all this, but then at the very, very end we find out that he hasn't, and that John David Washington's been the one that's been orchestrating all of this from the future. And I'm like, what is going on? I'm like, you're not clever, movie.
Yep.
And that's the thing, is that, like, this movie, maybe that's, like, I never thought I'd say the words Christopher Nolan schlock. But that's what this is.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's not intentional schlock, though.
Mm-hmm.
It's schlock with a lowercase s.
I definitely, I didn't think I thought of the word schlock, but I was definitely kind of, watching this and thinking about it. I'm like, I was thinking that Christopher Nolan sat down and was like, how do I put the Christopher Nolan crazy sci-fi twist on, like, a goofy James Bond spy movie? And this is how he did it, It's just kind of off the wall, like, underbaked, that type of thing. And we have all that espionage and globetrotting and stuff like that, and it was just something else. I've never seen anything quite like it, I have to say. That's
what it is, though. It's like a Bond movie mixed with I wouldn't even know how to describe it. It's like a plot device from, like, The Outer Limits.
Yeah.
It's like, I that's what I mean, though. It's because, like, you watch the trailers. In a way, the trailers are almost misleading because they put such a heavy emphasis on the reverse, like, time travel element, and that it's a thing in the movie, but it's a plot device more than it is. That's like, okay, Rob, maybe you can, because I had a hard time trying to formulate my thoughts on this.
Sure.
Time travel in this, what are we calling it?
Inversion in
this is used very, very differently than what the dreamscape is used as in Inception.
Yes, I would say it's only till maybe, like, the halfway point or a little further when we get our temporal pincer movement stuff, when they're just like, we have to fight fire with fire and everything's going backwards and forwards at the same time.
That's the thing, though, is that, like, they're using it as, like, but it's being used, it's like, imagine in Inception, if instead of the dream machine being used as a plot device, it was also used as, like, I don't want to say it's an action sequence, because like obviously what the Joseph Gordon-Levitt rotating hallway sequence is in Inception our moment where we have John David Washington in the hallway having the reverse fight. That is the equivalent. That's clearly, whether it be Christopher Nolan's intent or it was the marketing department's intent, those are on the same levels. Yet Joseph Gordon-Levitt, what's with these people's three names? Joseph Gordon-Levitt fighting a NPC in a rotating hallway is much easier to visually digest and what's going on a narrative level than what is happening in Tenet during the reverse gunplay sequence.
Definitely. Yeah, there's the first time we see that fight, because of course we see it twice, because, time travel. But the first time we see it, it's one of those, like I said, those don't worry about it moments. Like, it looks insane, and it seems like that's the point. Like, you don't know who's going forward, who's going backwards, what the hell's going on. It's just visually enthralling. And it doesn't, capture, like you said, that essence of, well, what is this being done for other than we have to have a fight? Because as they go in the room, this hasn't happened yet, and it's about to happen. And it's just like, go with it. Don't worry about it type of idea again.
It seems like when it comes to this movie, forget that one particular action sequence, but the whole movie, it feels like they had the gimmick first and they built a plot around it. It's like, okay, like you said, Christopher Nolan wants his science fiction-y plot device. And it's like, okay, how am I going to do time travel different? And I'm like, okay, like you said, the plot device isn't inherently bad. It's just the execution of it that's less than ideal.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing, because like we didn't even talk about like the actors in this really. Like John David Washington is fine.
Oh yeah, I like him.
He's kind of sleepwalking through this. He's not really. He's asked to play a lesser tier Daniel Craig Bond.
Very apathetic or impassive, I found from him.
Yeah. We have Robert Pattinson acting in a completely different movie. We have Elizabeth Debicki just kind of playing love interest with love in quotation marks.
One of the 4 women in this movie, yes.
One of the 4 women in this movie. Again, love interest with the word love in quotation marks.
Can I just say about Elizabeth Debicki, she is so goddamn tall.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no. The whole time I was watching this, I'm like, God, Rob must have, like, I hope Rob has a really big hoodie he can, like, put over his lap. Because I'm like, Rob must be so... A couple of times, like, we kind of get the, like, Ted Bundy director stuff where, like, she's bending over and, like, you see her rear end a few times. I'm like, God damn it, Rob must have been losing his mind during these moments.
She is very good looking. The only thing she was missing was a cigarette in this movie. But... We're back to Cinemoddities form. But I loved the scene where like she's introduced and we don't really see her in frame with any other characters until she's at dinner with our main character and they're talking and there's just a whole fucking discussion about this fake painting that is just insane exposition about this universe.
Yep.
And then Sator's goons come up and they like take the wife away. And there's a shot of the goons and Elizabeth Debicki walking through the kitchen. And Elizabeth Debicki has like 9 inches on all of the goons. And I'm like, this looks so strange.
It does. She's 6'3".
Man, that's taller than I am.
Oh, but I think... But I think they also have her in heels, like in almost every single scene.
Yes.
And that's a conscious decision.
Oh yeah, she is so tall and so lanky, and it's just like it's Christopher Nolan visuals. Like I'm sure he saw her in something, whether it be Great Gatsby or
Great Gatsby.
Yeah, I think there was some other famous thing she was in. I'm forgetting, but I'm sure he saw her and
she was in Guardians of the Galaxy too.
Like I remember that movie.
She's the gold. No, because like I've always remembered her from Great Gatsby because she's the tall woman.
Yeah, Jordan.
Yeah, because Tobey Maguire's 5'3" and she's 6'3". I remember just being like I said, just laughing like throughout that entire movie, and being like, "This is hysterical." Like Baz Luhrmann has a great sense of humor, and I've remembered her ever since then. And anytime I see her in something, she stands out to me. Pardon the pun. And so she sits there and like he has her in heels the entire movie.
Oh,
and and then like we have her and I swear like it's the strangest thing, her dynamic with John David Washington, because like as we all know, Christopher Nolan's never had sex before. He does not know what it's like to interact with a woman on a romantic level. And like there's like I don't want to say there's like a romantic, it's the same like oh God, I don't know how to describe it. There's one way I know how to describe it, but it's the same like male-female interaction that Matthew McConaughey and Anne Hathaway have in Interstellar.
Okay.
Where like there is some attraction there, but the director doesn't know how to convey it to the audience.
Okay.
Not because they don't understand it themselves.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
You know what I'm getting at, right?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of one of the things that was, as I was watching this, thinking of it as a Bond movie, the very non-Bond thing is that the main character doesn't get the girl at the end. Like, there's a happy ending for Elizabeth Debicki, but, there's no, like, I was expecting Robert Pattinson to be like, come in, protagonist, and he's, like, just turning off his comms and having sex with Elizabeth Debicki as the camera, pulls away. Because I think that you're right, Christopher Nolan doesn't really know how to fully form that love interest, and at this reverse side of that, the thing that I think does succeed with Elizabeth Debicki in this movie is that her dynamic with Sator, with Kenneth Branagh, that it is so perfectly tense and awkward, and like that scene when he's like,
thank you for saying the word awkward.
He's like, I'm gonna beat the shit out of you with a belt right now, and I'm like, okay, we're doing this. This is a scene.
Excuse me. It's a belt with cufflinks.
Yes, he puts the cufflinks. And
I started. Okay, I think we've made a joke. Okay, domestic abuse is horrible in real life, but in movie world, it's hilarious. The fact I saw him doing that, I'm like, oh please let him use that as like a weird makeshift version of like, oh God, brass knuckles.
Oh, sure,
I'm like, please. Like, it's like the bougie version of like a nail through a 2x4.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
It's like, I'm like, oh my God, this like. The more I think about this might be the greatest schlocky. It's either the best worst schlocky film ever, or it's the worst best schlocky film ever. I don't know which one it is.
It's one of them, but they're both inversions of each other, so it's perfect.
Exactly. Okay, I'm glad we can finally get to Kenneth Branagh. As I was watching this, I know in the previews they show him very infrequently, but like as I started hearing him talk, I'm like, there's no way that they're having him do like a shoddy Russian accent. I'm like, there's no way. I'm like, no way. This has to be some sort of cover or act. And then add to that in the previews for this is the preview I was mentioning. We had a preview for Death on the Nile where he's doing another accent. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, please no. And then it dawned on me a third of the way into the movie that he is doing not just the same literal accent, but he's playing the exact same character, Kenneth Branagh, in Jack Ryan's Shadow Recruit with Chris Pine. It's the exact same character.
Okay.
And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm like, did Christopher Nolan not know this? Did Kenneth Branagh not tell him? I just feel like did the whole cast and crew play a practical joke on Christopher Nolan? And that's why Nolan was just like, just dump this in the theater so nobody will ever see it.
It could be. I'm very aware. I'm sure you're more aware of that Kenneth Branagh stuff, but I definitely, when Sator finally comes on the scene, and it's like, okay, once again a Bond thing. We have the Russian guy as the villain, and he's doing the heavy Russian accent, and I'm just like, oh man, he's really just hamming it up with that Russian stuff, and he goes hard. And even in his big Bond villain speech at the end, I just felt like he was going a little extra cheesy with it. He gets so flustered at one point that he actually starts spraying saliva. And I'm like, oh God. And then he spits on her. And I'm like, oh, it's like, fuck you, movie. I'm like, stop it. Like, everybody knows who listens to the Star Wars podcast that I would make the joke that during The Force Awakens, when Domhnall Gleeson is like giving his like Nazi-esque speech to the troops, that if you look closely on Captain Phasma's armor, you can see teeth marks. I would always make that joke to people who don't understand that, like, what would you call it? The idiom? It's not an idiom, is it? Chewing the scenery? No,
Expression?
Yeah, expression. Not really slang, but there's some word for it. Yeah, expression's probably the best.
Expression.
Turn of phrase, probably.
Turn of phrase, I guess. And that's the thing. Like, I would always use that as a joke to people who didn't get that turn of phrase. And then, like, he starts spraying the audience with saliva. And then I'm like, no. I'm like, the more I think about it, like, this is one of those weird things that I have a hard time conveying to people, and I would hope that the Cinemoddities audience is enlightened enough to get this. Like, I have a partition in my brain when it comes to movies. There's the film lover, and then there's the person that I am that just I have my own personal taste.
Yeah,
it's the cinephile, and then just the person that loves just sheer entertainment and spectacle. And yet, like, the objective film goer in me is like, this movie's garbage. Like, no, like, Nolan has his head so far up his own ass that either he doesn't care or he's just happy where he is. He just doesn't care. Then there's a part of me that's just like, oh, this is garbage. And I'm like, I admire a Christopher Nolan just being like, this is crap. And I'm putting it out there regardless because I don't care. It's like, as I was watching this, there was one particular movie that I kept thinking of, and I couldn't figure out why until pretty much the end of the movie, where my brain turned off because, like Rob said, the temporal pinch movement happens, and it's just like you can't hear anything. It's just stuff happening. It's just spectacle. It's almost Michael Bay level of just like the plot doesn't matter anymore. Spectacle. And I kept thinking about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, nothing like, I like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Most people, you'd be hard pressed to find someone that says this is their favorite Tarantino film.
Sure.
And I think the same can be said for Tenet. I think you're going to be very hard pressed to find a Nolan fan that says Tenet is my favorite Nolan film, because I think both movies, for 9/10 of their runtime, are very self-indulgent. They're being made by filmmakers that are held so far in like esteem by audiences and critics. They're beyond reproach. They're doing whatever they want, and it's not until the final act that you finally just like they just blow their wad.
Yes.
And they're just like whatever. But at least Tarantino knows how to make a climax that everybody can appreciate.
Sure.
Like, I'm watching the end of Tenet, and I'm like, I don't care about any of these characters. I'm like, I don't care. Like, our protagonist literally doesn't have a name. Robert Pattinson is auditioning to be Batman, and we have Elizabeth Debicki spraying suntan lotion on the side of a yacht. I'm like, what is happening? It's like, what? Like, what is going on? But at least with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, at least it's grounded in what's the term they keep what Tarantino's new thing he's on now? Historical retelling, or what's the word?
Revisionist history.
Thank you. Revisionist history of like, okay, Manson murders. What would happen that if the Manson clan got confused, went to the wrong address, a drunk Leonardo DiCaprio goes out and says, what's the line that you love so much, Rob?
If you want to smoke weed in a secluded place, fix your fucking muffler.
Exactly.
Bunch of goddamn fucking hippies. What the fuck? Hey, you! Yeah, asshole! I'm talking to you! What the hell do you think you're doing bringing that noisy hunk of shit around here at midnight? This is a private road, all right? Who are you? And who are you here to see, huh?
Nobody, sir. We just got lost in a little turnaround.
Oh, horse shit. You fucking hippies came up here to smoke dope on a dark road, huh? Next time you want to try that, fix your fucking muffler.
Like, that is perfect. Like, a drunk, fat Leonardo DiCaprio making margaritas at 1 a.m. being like, goddamn fucking hippies.
Yes.
Like that is, like, anybody can relate to that premise. Like, it's late at night, you're just trying to do your own thing, and goddamn hippies show up outside your house. Nobody can relate to a temporal pincer movement where they have no idea the rules and logic of the universe.
Yep.
Like, that's the problem. Nolan, both filmmakers have their heads up their asses, but Tarantino at least knows how to make a climax that pretty much anybody can relate to.
That's a good point. That's a good point because I think, you know, something when we get his thoughts dropped in later on, a big thing between Justin and Heather and I after seeing this movie, which Justin loves to do with whoever, you know, has listened to the episodes Justin's been on. He was definitely trying to understand this movie and trying to get into the, like, wait, you know, it's like, so it was Robert Pattinson that opens that gate, but when they get to the algorithm at the end, and he's trying to, like, parse this out, and I'm like, I don't think this is the way to discuss this movie, because we would need to have the movie in front of us to make any headway. And you're right that there's more relatability in, oh yeah, you know, this is Tarantino's ending, like you said, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, than the just giant spectacle of a war where we don't even know who we're fighting. Like, there's just people that are fighting against our good guys at the end of Tenet, and it's just like, okay, everything's going forward and backwards. Don't worry about it. Just look at it. Pretty much.
And that's what I'm trying to get at. Because, like, in that, like, how long do you think that final sequence is, Rob? That final, like, what? That's 20 minutes, you'd say, give or take.
Yeah, I'd say 20. You know, probably like 30 if you include the planning, and then when they go through the turnstiles to reverse the blue team or invert the blue team. But the action's probably like a good 20 minutes. Well, intercut with like you said, Elizabeth Debicki spraying suntan lotion on the ground.
Yeah, that's a thing that happens.
That was very funny. I remember seeing that in the movie, and what he, like, Sator's on the phone, or he's like eating fruit or something, and you just see there's just a shot of her just holding the bottle of suntan lotion and just squirting it on the ground, and I'm like, oh, okay, she's doing something.
Then we get a scene of her actually applying it to his back.
Yep.
And I'm like, A, why is this happening? Why is this happening in the movie? And two, he's about to blow up the universe. Why is he like doing this? It's like, it's strange. Like, none of the character motivations make sense. Like, that's the thing. Other than Elizabeth Debicki, nobody has character motivation other than the plot tells them to have them.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Like, why is the protagonist doing what he's doing? Because the plot tells him to.
Mm-hmm.
Why is Robert Pattinson there? Because he wants to be Batman.
Yes.
Why is Kenneth Branagh doing what he's doing? Because he has an infatuation with health and he's very anal retentive. It's like, what kind of motive? Like, it's like, oh, he doesn't want to. If he can't have the world, nobody can.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what? And it's like, wait. And he found pieces of the algorithm, like, in nuclear storage containers. Well, where'd he get them from? A scientist in the future. Well, why are they sending it back? Because nuclear vaults in the 20th century were the most secure place, except that they're not. And it's like, what is happening? I'm like, could nobody, like, I don't get it. And it's like, well, why does the future want Kenneth Branagh to blow up the future? Because they're mad about climate change. Like, yes. I heard that there was like one line, like that was one line of dialogue, and it's never mentioned again.
At the very end in his speech, he's like, the future does not want, because the oceans rose and the ice caps melted, and then I'm just like, holy shit! I'm like, aren't we at the end of the movie? And that comes like, what, 10 minutes after, where they're like, he's going to activate the algorithm. And I'm like, oh God, the algorithm, what's that? It's going to end the world. How do we stop it? We can't let him kill himself because he has pancreatic cancer. And I'm like, okay, fine.
But isn't there a thing too where he has, like, they can't just shoot him in the head because his Fitbit is a dead man switch? Which,
yes,
that's a thing that happens.
Christopher Nolan takes a cue from Spawn the movie, because the clown in Spawn, not the clown, I think the dude in Spawn has a dead man switch that when he dies, it's going to activate bombs to blow up America. And in Tenet, when Kenneth Branagh dies, it's a dead man switch to blow up the universe. Oh my God, Zach, it's so, I think we're saying we have the exact same opinion on it, but I am really starting to love how absolutely bonkers this is.
Oh my God, I don't know. The other thing, though, is that, like, is I was sitting down to this movie, and, like, again, I think I told Rob this. It was the idea of, like, going to see a movie,
yep,
not knowing anything about it, but being like, okay, I know it's going to be a good movie, though. Then I walked out of it, and I'm like, ugh. And I'm like, ugh. I'm like, and that's the thing that kind of scares me, is that, like, even though I don't love Dunkirk, I don't love the Batman movies, at least they're solid entertainment.
Yeah.
And this is just, like, this felt like someone who just, like, didn't care. And I think you can't argue whether they cared or not. I think the directions either was it apathy or was it just like, oh God, cynicism. Is it apathy or is it cynicism?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I feel I was thinking of it more as like Christopher Nolan was like, what has nobody ever seen in an action movie before? That's what the focus should be. Like the forward reverse, the fighting, the cars flipping up, the buildings blowing up, getting reconstructed. It seemed like that was the focus, and everything else was just, like you said, underbaked, written by a first-year college student. The algorithm is the name of a device, which makes no sense. Inverting entropy. So I don't know if it was maybe apathy towards certain aspects, but more focus on the visual aspects. That's how I kind of took it.
But there's ways of doing that, though, that aren't like deliberately, that have a very high cost of entry or high barrier of entry.
Oh, sure.
Like if you want to have reverse action sequences, that's fine. Like that's a great angle to get people into a theater. But you don't need to make it that overly complex. And if you are going to make it that overly complex, then you have to make it understandable. And if this was anybody else, I'd be like, oh, they weren't able to stick the landing. But he did that in Inception. Mm-hmm. Like, so we know he can do it. And, like, I know it was Jonathan Nolan, who I think was the co-screenwriter on Inception. Yeah. And I don't know if he was involved with this. And maybe that's the thing, too, is that, like, think about it. When Nolan was making Inception, it was right after The Dark Knight, but probably he had to think these things out in advance because he didn't have his clout yet.
Yeah.
And now he probably does. He's probably at a point where he doesn't have to explain himself to anybody.
I definitely think that. I don't remember seeing Jonathan Nolan's name anywhere.
Yeah, neither do I.
This, and so he probably was not involved, or if he was involved, it was a very minor way. But I definitely think you're right where, you know, Christopher Nolan just has that ability to be like, this is what I want to do, and you're going to let me do it type of thing.
It's beyond reproach. And that's the problem. And that's the same issue with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Does that film need to be 3.5 hours of watching Brad Pitt drive around? No, it does not. But like it's at a point where like, oh, who's going to tell Quentin Tarantino no?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, do we need the scene of Margot Robbie seeing herself in the movie when she goes to the theater? Probably not, because she's not the one who's going to die at the end.
But the thing, though, is that, like, Tarantino is setting out to make a very specific thing. He's trying to capture a mood of a specific time and place. This is it's a science fiction espionage film. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That has a very heavy-handed plot device. And then even, like, I remember, like when Science Lady is punching us in the face with exposition, it's like, oh, time travel. No, only certain devices have inversion. It's like, what do you mean certain devices? Is it like a magical wand that you wave over it and it can go back? Like, it doesn't make sense that, like, certain things can go back in time yet. But then we have, like, a time machine device.
Yes, that we got our turnstile, which looks like a turnstile, like a revolving door. Like it's so simple, and I
that's not introduced until halfway into the movie.
Exactly, and then I just it's definitely, I got the sense like Christopher Nolan, he knows that he has this new new idea. Like when you start the movie, it's this new idea of inversion, and he has to, you know, bring the audience up to speed on what it is. So we start with Science Lady doing the bullet thing, and it's like, fine, that's easy, but it seems that, you know, we just have like, oh, this bullet and this gun are inverted, that's what we get. And then slowly we build up to, oh, you know, there's these objects, every time you see like glass broken, we know it's going to have to get unbroken. And then eventually the movie's like, okay, is everybody just kind of on board with inversion? You can fucking invert anything. Like, there's just boats that are inverted by the end of this movie, like giant tankers and shit.
But that's the thing, though. We go from, oh, specific objects can be inverted to, oh, we can go back in time, but it's in reverse. But you're moving forward while you're back in time. But if you're doing that, you can't breathe the air because you'll suffocate. And everything is reversed. Fire is ice. Ice is fire.
God, that shit
it's like, what is happening? I'm like, why are you? I'm like, oh my God. Then like Elizabeth Debicki gets shot because we're told by Science Lady earlier in the film that if you get shot through inversion, it's infinitely worse.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go back in time, then come out earlier in time after going back in time, that it fixes all your problems.
Yeah, they like invert her to heal her or something like that. And that's where we get I guess to finish out, we have Science Lady, Elizabeth Debicki, Priya, the Indian arm dealer, and then we have a military lady that explains inversion again to our main character when he gets inverted. Those are the 4 women in this movie. And that's the whole thing where he's like, main character's like, I gotta invert to stop Sator from getting this, and then I have to invert 6 more times or 7. There's an even odd thing going on. It's like taking that like button to Pound Town, it's our even odd inversion thing going on right here. And I'm just like, that when he gets inverted, it just that's when the movie just started to like, I think the biggest schlocky thing in the movie is that it fucking killed Justin and I, that fire is ice and ice is fire. Like this is the first year screenwriting student who's just like, like flame, that it exerts heat. So if you went backwards, it would consume heat, and that's ice. And it's like, not really, but fine,
But if that's the case, wouldn't the weather be completely different?
Yeah.
Like, wouldn't that invert? Like, that would invert reality.
I think only the algorithm can do that.
But that's the thing, though, is that like that. It's kind of like, I remember this being it was a complaint very early on when Inception was released. Someone's like, oh, if you're gonna make a dream heist movie, why not go all out with like the surreal imagery?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, like instead of having people shoot with guns in the dreams, why don't you make it much more like everybody has their own weapon and something like that? It's like, no, it's just shooting guns at each other, and they all follow the same logic as they do in the real world. And it's like, okay, but like that's fine. Like enough's going, like in the rationalization that was like, okay, there's enough going on in Inception. You don't need to bend reality even further.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, like you were saying, like you should like the car catches on fire and then it turns to ice. It's like, wait, wouldn't the moment he lights the gas, wouldn't it immediately be ice? Like, wouldn't this cigarette lighter turn to ice immediately? And it's like, what is happening?
Yeah, I'm sure the movie, it's some, oh God, it's so...
If oxygen doesn't work in that world, then how does even a lighter work if there's no proper oxygen?
Yes, and it's I'm sure that there's some Christopher Nolan explanation of how it's like, no, only this is inverted, and it's like the concept of, I think Robert Pattinson tries to describe it at a certain point where he's like, the whole universe is on a scale of like how much shit is inverted and how much shit is not inverted. And right now there's not too much stuff inverted, but everything we see in the goddamn movie is inverted, and the algorithm is trying to tip that scale. And I'm like, just show me another building blowing up. Come on.
Okay. There's 2 things I want to bring up in regards to this movie. The first, I want to compare it to Interstellar.
Okay.
But before I get to that, I want to get to something else. The biggest takeaway and this is something that drives me nuts about movie, I don't even know what to call it, merchandise or just movie props. During the whole temporal pincer move thing where we have people going forward and backwards, and Robert Pattinson is just like driving forwards and backwards in time. Like at one point I lost track of him. I think Rob made the perfect Cinemoddities. Oh God, this really is a Cinemoddities movie. This might be the first true Cinemoddities movie.
Oh yeah.
I truly like the capital C. All the others so far have been with a lowercase c. He sits there and they have watches. Mm-hmm. And the watches are color-coded, which I found hysterical on top of everything else. Like, the blue and red helicopters weren't enough. The blue and red patches weren't enough. And yet, I really love the watches. Like, the idea of having an analog and a digital watch interlaced. Sure. I'm like, that's neat. I'm like, that's great. And so, during that entire, 25-minute sequence, I was enamored with these watches. I'm like, I want that watch. And I'm like, that has to exist. So I went on to Google and I did some research. And of course, analog digital watches are nothing new. But I'm like, I really want that watch with the giant digital time in the middle, and everything else is kind of on the edges. Mm-hmm. So I researched the watch. I'm like, okay. And I typed in Tenet wristwatch. And I'm like, oh, apparently Hamilton, the watchmakers are like big Christopher Nolan like tie-in partners.
Okay.
So I'm not sure if Rob remembers, but in Interstellar, Matthew McConaughey gives his daughter the watch, and it's a Hamilton watch. So it's not the first time that there's been a brand partnership.
Sure.
I have no idea if they've shown up in any other of the movies. I just know Interstellar. And so I was doing research on this, and apparently like the CEO of Hamilton's like, oh, like Warner Brothers came to us and asked us to make a digital analog watch, and we'd never done anything like this before. We never created a watch like this. And I'm like, that sounds really weird. I'm like, you're Hamilton. Of course you've made a watch like this at some point.
Yeah.
And so like they're like, oh, we had to completely like throw out our understanding of how watches are made. Like it's a real article. I'm not making this up. And like we had to sit there do this, and we made this one of a kind prop for Christopher Nolan, but we didn't know how important it would be to the movie's plot. And we only made 30 of them, and they were in the highest secrecies, like in our organization. Only our top engineers, R&D people, and I, the CEO, knew about this. And I'm like, okay, where can I buy the watch? And so I found out that there's an official Tenet Hamilton watch. And I'm like, oh crap, this is going to be like at least like a few grand.
Yeah.
And it's $2,000. And I'm looking at the watch, and then I'm not making this up. Rob, I know I've already described it, but could you please, for our audience's sake and for the dramatic telling of the story, describe the watches that John David Washington and Robert Pattinson are using at the end of the film?
Yeah, I think I remember them well enough. So like Zack said, it's a combination digital and analog, and one team has the timer in the middle going forward from 0 to 10, and the other team has it going backward from 10 to 0, and on the sides of them, on the I guess the circumference of the watch face, we have our analog elements, and I think it's going forward for both people, unless we're seeing it from an inverted perspective. I'm confusing myself now, I think.
You're not wrong, sir. You're not wrong. Well, the fact that in the middle of, like, you have this, again, analog watch with the minute hand, hour hand, and second.
Yeah.
And you have all that, but in the middle you have a giant digital timer.
Yeah, and it's got like that, like that alarm clock, like green light type, like font type face. But it's
neon blue and red. Like
yes,
it's unmistakable.
Yes.
And because the neon of the timer is so bright, it illuminates the entire watch. It gives it like a blue and red glow, respectively.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at this watch on Hamilton's official website. It's $2,100 for the low price of $2,100. But this is the best part. I'm looking at this watch and I'm like, where's the digital timer? And then it actually says, and I'm not making this up, for a $2,000 watch.
Oh no.
Please note, the special edition khaki navy below zero is powered by an automatic movement and does not feature the digital screen that appears on the custom-made prop watch we made for Tenet.
What the hell is the point then?
Exactly. Like, you had somebody that was, I wasn't going to spend $2,000, but you had somebody that was willing to buy this product. And I went, what the hell?
I would have put it on a wish list at least.
They made an official Tenet watch and didn't even make the watch from the movie.
That's super lame.
That's insane. That's insane. But you know what the best part of this thing is? I did some research and I looked for, I scoured eBay and all these different like marketplace sellers looking for a facsimile. And I found a watch that literally does this. It has the analog time hands and it has a giant digital clock in the middle.
Okay.
For $150.
Boom.
Yet Hamilton watches one of the, like, I don't want to say Hamilton's not Rolex, but it ain't exactly a cheap watch either. Couldn't figure out how to do this.
Jeez, that's insane.
And to add insult to injury, this is the kicker. This is the cherry on top. For 10 years now, Casio has made I can't even finish this properly. An analog digital watch with the exact same thing. A digital clock in the middle with analog hands for $26. Yet the CEO of Hamilton Watches could not figure out how to design this.
Oh my god.
They could have literally spent $25 at Walmart and gotten this watch.
Yep. Jeez, that you are right. That is insane.
It's insane. insane. I mentally, I cannot wrap my head around this. I'm like, everything about this movie doesn't make sense. Even the marketing tie-in.
Yes. That's good. That's good.
Okay, so anything else you want to say, Rob? Like in the immediate, do you have any comments on that?
No, I mean, I didn't look into that. I definitely noticed the watches. I wasn't as enthralled with them, I think, as you were, but it is a cool idea. But that is just absolutely baffling to me. The only thing I could think is maybe that, Casio, the people making these cheap watches, they got the technology from the future, from inversion. Hamilton's going to figure out how to make it for cheap in a few years. It's a temporal pincer movement. This whole movie is a temporal pincer movement.
Okay. You know what I think? Okay, Rob, this is a question. I'm trying to think of all the schlockiest movies I can think of. But like highbrow schlock?
Okay.
Like, is this schlockier than Starship Troopers?
Ooh.
Starship Troopers is very self-aware.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say no. Like,
that's what I was going to get at. Like you were right. Like Starship Troopers is completely aware of what it is and what it's doing, down to the very end of the movie. I just always think of Neil Patrick Harris going, "It's afraid," and they all cheer, and it's like that's the point of this movie. But yeah, you're right. You make a really good point that Christopher Nolan is trying to make a smart, clever sci-fi James Bond movie, and it comes off as, like you said, not immature from the storytelling sense, like the first year college student type of thing, and it's baffling. It's absolutely bonkers. That's
the thing, though, is that like this goes back to my ultimate question for anybody who's watched this film: were these poor choices made out of apathy, or cynicism? Like, there has to be a level of contempt for the audience. There has to be, because like I think there's so many dumb things that happen in this movie that are inexplicable, like. They do the whole thing at the beginning of not the beginning, like the first third of the film, where they're trying to break into the art gallery airport terminal, and it's all for naught. It's just there to later set up a way to save Elizabeth Debicki.
Yeah.
And that's like we have literally a 30 to 35 minute plot point just there, and it's all for naught, and it's in the short term just as a way to undo something that happens later in the film.
Yeah, and I think that goes back with what I was saying, that the visuals were the most important part, because I think, you're right that a lot of that is just set up so we can see what's going on, or our characters, when they invert themselves, have some way to do this. But at the same time, I'm also thinking that Christopher Nolan's just like, I want to run a plane into a building. Like, he's like, I want to do that, so let's just make that the first third of the movie. I'm going to not blow up, but I'm going to run this plane into this building and then write some reason why they're doing this around it. Because you're absolutely right. The whole thing is like they got to get in there and destroy the painting. And then like 2 scenes later, Sator's like, here's the painting. I knew to take it out. How? Don't worry about it.
But this is my thing, though, is that like any sort of movie, it has to go through so many iterations and drafts.
Oh yeah.
And like Christopher, like even like I didn't even see his wife's name on this.
Okay.
His wife's what? Emma Thompson?
Emma Thompson, yeah.
And she usually always produces his films. And I didn't see her name anywhere on this either. Okay. I'm not sure. I could be wrong about that. And I don't know. Like, that's the thing. Like, this comes across as somebody who's just kind of like driving along the highway and they're bouncing into the guardrails.
I like that.
And that's the thing. I don't know. Are they doing it because they're drunk? Are they doing it because they're not paying attention? Are they doing it because they just don't care? Mm-hmm. And I think that's the question. What is the motive behind this? Why did he make this movie? Like, he's Christopher Nolan. He never has to work again. Like, it's not like I don't know. Like, I that's where like I'm concerned now for Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker. It's kind of like almost the point where Tim Burton has been at for years. Are we at a point where Christopher Nolan has nothing left to say as a filmmaker? So he's just doing things that feel good in the short term.
That's interesting. Because I think that does match up with me saying that he just wants to show off, the visuals and what he can do. But that's a really good point. Where is he getting to that issue of like you said, Tim Burton? I don't think he's quite at Tim Burton, of course, yet. But you're right. He could be on that path we might get Jesus Christ, what the Nutter Butter, whatever the hell it's fucking called in Alice in Wonderland. We don't have the Nutter Butter yet, but it might be on its way.
But like having Elizabeth Debicki squeeze suntan lotion onto the floor to have Kenneth Branagh slip and then break his neck on the side, like that's the equivalent of it. It is. Like at the end of the day, you boil it down, it's two unnecessarily goofy moments in a film.
Sure.
That should have been not saying, again, you have to kill Kenneth Branagh on this. Like, I'm not arguing that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the idea that, like, that's how you're going to kill him. Like, she shoots him in the chest, then she drags his body over the suntan lotion because otherwise he'd be too heavy. It's like, what?
Yeah, you're
right.
It's
like, what? I'm like,
and then
what?
we even do get the comical shot afterward when her and the fixer are riding off on the boat, and they're dragging his body on a rope tied to the boat. I laughed in the theater when they and you're absolutely right. That's a really good point. That is just it's goofy, it's bonkers, it's Christopher Nolan being like, we got to get from point. I was about to say A to B, but at this point we're like triple Z to triple A. Yeah.
Why did he need his body?
I don't know. Nobody knows.
Like, that's a question, though. Like, why did they need his body?
Yeah.
Why did any of this, like, none of this makes sense? Like, okay. This is how I want to juxtapose this to Interstellar.
Sure.
I think it's fair to say Rob is not a big fan of Interstellar.
It's been hinted at a few times.
Yes. It comes down to, like, Rob disagrees with the whole thing about, like, how Interstellar is about, like, love and family.
Yes. I don't like love. I don't like family.
No.
Especially through time and space.
But that's the thing. Like, okay, like Rob, like, it's kind of like what Rob said earlier about Tenet. Like, a bunch of just, like, science-y words are sprinkled in, and they're there to, like, kind of just, what's the word? Tide the audience over. Like, we're throwing jargon at you. It's just there for you to kind of grease the skids. Much like how Elizabeth Debicki sprays suntan lotion on the floor of the yacht to grease the floor to drag Kenneth Branagh's dead body. That's what it's there for in Interstellar. But the ultimate point to Interstellar between Matthew McConaughey and his daughter, whether it be Mackenzie Foy, Jessica Chastain, or Elizabeth Bernstein, is the idea that can love transcend time and space? And that's, as a concept, not as a scientific concept, but more as a story beat, is a fascinating idea to ponder on. The idea that, like, just because somebody is gone or removed light years from one another or dead, can love this thing that we all experience at some point in our lives, yet is inherently intangible. Can it transcend the laws of time and space? That's an interesting science fiction concept. Whether it's executed brilliantly in my eyes or horribly in Rob's, that is a fantastic concept to think about. That's philosophy that you could ponder on for days. In Tenet, we don't get any of that. We just get, like, janky, broken time travel, like, logic. And janky, broken time travel logic works when you're making schlock. Like, if you're doing Looper and you have Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt sitting at a diner table, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt being like, if you show me a picture of your wife, or you telling me about my wife tells me that I'm never going to meet her because I'm going to make that choice. And Bruce Willis is like, don't try making sense of any of this. It doesn't matter. That is a very clever way of telling the audience time travel is literally just a way to move the plot forward.
Yeah.
Because it's not the plot. It's just a way to move it along. Don't worry about the finite details. Except Tenet, the entire plot is about time travel. It is
focused on it, hardcore.
It's the engine that propels the plot, yet the characters are telling us, don't worry about this. And it's like, no, you don't get to have your cake and eat it too, movie. You do not get to have your mushy cake. You don't get to have your sad birthday cake moment. That's the problem I have with this.
Sure.
There's no core idea to this movie. There's no backbone to it. Say what you will. Like, all of Christopher Nolan's films are inherently lacking, like, an emotional core, except for Interstellar. And that's why Interstellar resonates so well with me and why I detest Rob so much.
That's a good point. Even thinking about Inception, like, the most emotional thing in that movie is the son wants to destroy his father's oil conglomerate to make something for himself.
That's the thing, though. But at least, like, that makes sense. Like, that's, like, the weird thing about Inception is that, like, Inception can be about a couple of things depending on how you view it. Like, the film critical or the film, I don't know, cinephile understanding of Inception is it's about the illusion of cinema, because it's a production.
Yeah.
Because you have all these different, and that was even part of the marketing. Like, you have the architect, you have the forger, you have the I forget all the names. Like, remember you and I laughed about, what's her name? Oh my God, what's her name? Talia Al Ghul. Oh my God, why do I know that? But I don't know the actress's name.
Marion Cotillard.
Yes, Marion. Remember that? She was the Shade, and you and I would just laugh hysterically at that. We're like, the Shade. I want to be the Shade. But like, that was the whole thing, is that, like, it's a production. Like, it's about the illusion of, like, art and creating cinema. And you had, like, Dunkirk. Dunkirk is all about, like, again, I don't know what Dunkirk's about. Whatever, bad example.
That's a good. Yeah, the most emotional thing in Dunkirk is when
the kid dies.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. I was about to say what Cillian Murphy, whatever it's how it's pronounced,
kills him.
Kills him. Yeah, that's the most emotional part of the movie. Yeah,
and but like, there's core, like, when Christopher Nolan's not making franchise fare, and you can at least make arguments about the Dark Knight movies. Like, Batman Begins is all about the idea of being a symbol versus being the man. The Dark Knight is all about faith in humanity, and The Dark Knight Rises is all about kind of like having a choice about what you want to go on. Like, are you doomed to the life that you're currently living, or can you grow as a person?
Yeah, sure.
And it's also about living a lie. Like, the Dark Knight to this day has one of the most interesting concepts in any movie. And it's a shame that The Dark Knight Rises kind of pisses it away. The idea that we deserve, I think Michael Caine even says it at the end of the movie. He says, sometimes we deserve better than the truth.
Yeah.
And I've always found that a fascinating concept, that, like, oh, sometimes we deserve better than the hand we're dealt. And then, like, The Dark Knight Rises is like, nope, the truth is always the best choice. And I'm like, yeah, but that's too easy of a concept. Like, that's like, oh, the truth will set you free. Not always.
Sure.
Because ignorance is bliss, which is a thing that I think is even said in this movie, right? Isn't there some line of dialogue? This movie is filled with a bunch of weird, like, archaic sayings too. Like you were saying, like,
ignorance is our ammunition.
I'm sorry, that's what you said. Yes,
lying is standard operating procedure. That comes up. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
There's a lot of archaic sayings in this. It's just like there's even one thing that Robert Pattinson says at the very end, and I really wish I could have heard it properly and the sound mixing was done properly. I swear to God, folks, if there's an Academy Awards this year, and I don't care if this is the only film that's released for the rest of the year, if this film gets one nomination for sound editing or mixing, I am going to shoot somebody. Because it's not like I don't care. No. He says something at the very end, and he's like, oh God, it's about time travel. I can't even paraphrase.
Yeah, I remember. I don't remember it. I remember the moment you're
spiel.
Referencing.
He said, as he's saying goodbye to John Robert Washington, he's like, the present is a beautiful thing. It would be a crime to change it.
Just save the world. Can't leave anything to chance.
But can we change things if we do it differently?
What's happened's happened. Just an expression of faith in the mechanics of the world. It's not an excuse to do nothing.
Fate?
Call it what you want.
What do you call it?
Reality.
Robbing the present of its existence is a crime. He says something like that. It's
now
like,
that I'm remembering that whole kind of his ending dialogue, and then like the ending dialogue of the movie when Elizabeth Debicki sees her son and he shoots Priya. Like, that's all just cliche one-liners, because even Robert Pattinson is like, we're really good friends, and, you know, I met you this many years ago, and you're going to meet me this many years in the future. And he's like, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, but it's the end of the movie. And then that, like, the last line of dialogue is like, you know, nobody appreciates the bomb that didn't go off. And I'm just like, okay, you know, we're hitting it a little too hard, I think.
that's the thing. Like, in that, like, there's stuff too. Like, I think Robert Pattinson says, "See you in the beginning." Yeah. Like, it's really like it's 2 cent dialogue.
Oh, geez, it's something else, man. It is absolutely. You're right about the message, though, and I think that is what I was saying as well. That there might not be a message to this movie. It is just Christopher Nolan wants to show you what he can do. He wants to take that plane and run it into the hangar. He wants you to be confused as hell when there's like a fire truck, an 18-wheeler, and 2 other things surrounding an armored car, and and it's loud as hell. He just wants to show this off, it seems. It's the Nutter Butter. What the hell is that called? Why can I never remember that?
All right, you go love this. I'm looking at the quote section on IMDb, and the last quote is "Cat: hurry up."
That's it?
That's it.
Wait, like, that is there more than there's probably more than one instance of that in the movie, right?
Apparently, it's gotten 2 out of 23 people found this interesting, so the majority does not find this fascinating.
Jesus, that's something else, man. Oh, I do. I'm sure when we get Justin's thoughts, he'll say this. But one of the funniest things I saw was when we were talking about it afterwards. Justin was like, he's like, I could not tell you one character's name in that movie.
I disagree with that.
I do as well. I definitely got their names, but he was just like, I think the audio mixing was getting him hard. Not getting him hard, but getting to him hard, just to clarify. The audio mixing was getting me hard because it was so loud. It was giving him problems.
That's great. That's a fantastic way to misuse that term, or that expression. Oh, man, that was getting him hard. No, not that kind of way.
Like the negative way.
That's great. It's getting hard and not in the good way. That'd be a great like a tagline for like a credits thing, like Tenet. Yes. This movie, the sound mixing was getting him hard and not in the good way.
I definitely, I mean, regardless of the sound mixing, with the dialogue, I should say, I think, it's been forever. Anybody who listens to Cinemoddities, they know that Rob loves things in reverse. That's where the ending outro.
Of course.
And I have to say, some of the score in this movie with the sounds going in reverse, I was loving it. I was just all on board for just hearing reverse noises that loud. It was awesome. The one that stood out to me the most was the car chase scene, like when the protagonist is climbing on top of the fire truck, like on the ladder, and you're just hearing the craziest noises going backwards, and I'm just so on board for it.
Neat. Like that's the thing that's so weird. Like this feels like a movie that's tailor made for us. I think it 100% goes back to what I was saying earlier. I am Christopher Nolan. I make this movie in the future for our younger selves, and this is, and again, because Rob will eventually become Vernon Chapman.
Which reminds me,
Vernon Chapman's the inverted Rob.
Exactly. We have to mention, because something Zack thought of, which I did not, which is because we're all in time vortex inversion world. That when we discussed Wonder Chosen, we did discuss Patience, the inverted episode, where the episode plays forward and then plays backwards after this first commercial break, and then I'm pretty sure after the second commercial break, it is 2 episodes together, one played forward, one played backwards, or something insane, and it is the most ridiculous thing, and it is the culmination of Christopher Nolan and Vernon Chapman, Rob and Zack, somewhere where they're going to meet. It's like that point in the final battle of Tenet where both the forward-moving and backward-moving clocks hit the 5-minute mark. That's when Wonder Chosen Patience episode happens. I don't know if you can reverse engineer where we are in the world with that, but possibly it could be done. But that is... Wonder Chosen is the best of both worlds.
Yes. We figured it out, Rob. We figured it out.
Patience.
Tenet.
Patience.
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 And it even thinking about it more, I haven't seen the Patience episode of Wonder Shows in a while, but there is stuff that when you watch the first bit, it makes no sense and you don't understand it, but when it plays in reverse, it makes sense. And God, Vernon Chapman and Christopher Nolan. I mean, maybe, who knows, Zach, we might be the same person.
Oh, God.
There might be like a cross inversion happening, a cross version.
Well, to be fair, has anyone ever seen Vernon Chapman, Rob, and Christopher Nolan and myself in the same room together?
Exactly. The plot thickens.
I have a question. Like, is this going to be one of those movies that's going to have, like, again, this movie's only been out. A lot of people, the vast majority of people have not seen it yet.
Yeah.
Is this going to be one of those movies kind of like, I don't want to say like what The Shining has become now, but like, is this going to be like a Dark Side of the Moon where like people are going to start like playing it like in reverse and seeing if there's anything like there, like if you play the film in reverse?
Oh, absolutely. I could totally see people doing that where they're just going to, play it in reverse. They're going to see what's revealed. They're probably going to hear things like weird hidden stuff. And I'm sure this is one of those movies that once it gets, I'm sure they exist already, but I think it'll blow up that once this starts to get like some major viewing audience, whether it be in theaters or when it is sold on home video or something like that, there's going to be so many goddamn YouTube videos of 10 things you didn't notice about.
It's already there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I went to YouTube and typed in Tenet, and like the first thing was Tenet explained.
And that's going to be. I think there's probably so much in the background, and that the little Easter eggs, like I said, of time travel. I think we've been mentioning the one that this movie uses red and blue to denote what's going forward and going backwards. And I'm sure there's people out there who are going to be like, Christopher Nolan is so smart. Like, he uses red for time going forward and blue for time going backward because it's the Doppler effect, and things going forward get red shifted and things going backward get blue shifted. And it's like, no, he just needs a way to make it make a little bit of sense.
I already read a fan theory about this.
Okay.
There's nothing to back this up in the film, but there's already a fan theory that says that Elizabeth Debicki's son eventually grows up to be Robert Pattinson.
Oh, I think I saw some post like on Reddit about that or something, and I read that and I was like, yeah, like you said, there's no backing to that in the movie.
Hey, Rob, you want to know a secret about Tenet? If you play it in reverse, the only sound you hear is a very hushed whisper of Christopher Nolan saying, "Fuck you, fuck you, fuck all of you."
It's in every track on the score. That's mixed in somewhere in reverse?
No, it's not mixed in. That is it. That's all you hear. That's all you hear for 2.5 hours.
I'm pretty sure if you play this in reverse, it matches up perfectly with The Wizard of Oz. Oh, God.
Oh, God, this movie.
You are absolutely right, though. This is going to be played in reverse, like it's going to be done to death. Certain scenes, the whole thing. It's just, the deluge is coming, for sure.
But this is the weird thing, though. It's like, we were both around, and we were kind of partly responsible in 2010, like when like Inception was the biggest thing, like that summer and fall, to the point where I think it's even referenced. I remember there's like a Black Eyed Peas song where like it's even referenced. I know like it was like even it was everywhere in pop culture, but like in a very like specific tier or strata. Mm-hmm. Like I know it's like it was even like referenced in like in another song, I forget what it was, but like Inception doesn't really have that much of a cultural footprint anymore.
No, I mean, I think the only thing that might exist, which I haven't heard in a while, but I'm sure it's just tapering out. We have to go deeper. Like that was the biggest thing from that movie, is that no one talks about limbo anymore. No one talks about
Well, even the Inception sound. Remember,
oh sure, yeah.
We even get that. We got that in this film.
Yes.
When the plane's like going into the building, like it is Blanc dialed up to like 15. It's like Blanc. I'm like, oh my God, he somehow made it worse. Like, that's the thing, though. Is, like, we don't even talk about the Inception wonk anymore.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if that's because, A, Inception's not as culturally relevant as it once was, being 10 years old, or because we live in a culture now where there's just so much stuff, nothing gets time to breathe anymore.
That's kind of how I think about it.
Unless it's Avengers Infinity War.
Yeah, that's how I kind of think about it, that, everything gets kind of pushed out. And I know it's not exactly in the same vein, but Zach and I have talked about, with the state of, like, television and streaming services. It's like there's so much stuff that every time I talk to somebody and they're like, have you seen this? And it's like, there's almost an infinite number of stuff now. And I can't keep track of all of it. And some of it rises to the top, and not even the stuff that rises to the top has staying power. Like you said, the Avengers Endgame, nobody talks about that anymore.
Highest grossing film of all time. It's as if it never happened.
Yeah, exactly. And it's all kind of like this weird branching kind of, permeating system of things. It's like the only time you hear anybody talk about The Boys is because they have Amazon Prime. And then you only hear people talk about, Twilight Zone if they have CBS All
It's because
Access.
Rob is the only person that likes it in a cynical way.
An octopus hacks a computer, everybody. I am not making that up. But it's so disjointed, and I feel like, that's where we are, that there's just so much stuff. And it's been in existence. I think this is just how things happen. The music world has been this way forever, where you have things that rise to the top and became famous, but nowadays it's just like so much stuff gets released that, you have people who have, never heard of certain bands that I have lived with my whole life. And that's just the way it goes. And I don't think, like you said, nothing gets time to breathe anymore.
Yeah. I guess that's probably what it comes down to. But that's the thing. There's nothing. I know we've talked about it before, like how things catch on in the culture. Mm-hmm. Is there going to be anything, and how could we, it's kind of almost unfair to ask you this. Is there anything memeable about this movie? In your opinion?
Geez. Nothing immediately comes to mind. Like, there's no real kind of, standout lines. There's no, like, I'm trying to think of images maybe, but.
Like the equivalent of, like, the Inception wonk. Like, is there anything like that that's, like, I don't want to say exclusive to this, but, like, that's the thing. Like, the only thing I can think about is the idea of going forwards. Like, do they still make new episodes of Saturday Night Live? I could see Saturday Night Live trying to parody this.
Sure. But yeah, I think, there's nothing else pops into my head immediately. And I think that's where the memeability would happen. Like, something is just so immediately tractionable that they take it and run with it. And this movie is just so dense in that way that you can't, really pick anything out. I mean, there was that line from the trailer that I think that I saw the most, where Robert Pattinson is like, that part is a little bit dramatic, but nobody's talking about that, and nobody's gonna talk about that for this movie or anything. And so, it's too, I like, schlocky's probably a better way to say it, but I'm almost like it's too dense and vacuous at the same time.
Yeah. I guess that's it. I guess there's nothing to latch onto with this.
It is self-inverted.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Like I said, I don't see this latching on for many reasons. I think people aren't focused on movies right now. Everybody forgets the summer of 2010 was a really bad summer for movies. There wasn't a lot good that summer. It was like Toy Story, Iron Man 2, Inception, and that was kind of it.
Okay.
It wasn't, and that's the thing. There's so much crap now on Netflix and all that.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't think people are concerned with movies right now. And plus, like we said, everybody's taste is all over the place.
Yep.
There's no actor in this that rises above anybody else. It's, again, think about it, the most high profile person in this movie is Robert Pattinson.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, John David Washington, he was in Black Klansman. That's the only other place I know him from. Other than that, I don't know anything else he's done at all.
Yeah, Kenneth Branagh. Well, Kenneth Branagh's been around forever. He was, oh God, what was his character in Wild Wild West?
Oh God, who was he in Wild Wild West?
Doctor somebody.
Was he the bad guy?
Dr. Lovelace.
Oh, that's right, he was. He looks. Oh God, that I mean, there was so much weird hair on that character.
Oh god, that movie has a lot of blatant and subtle racism.
Oh my! I'm thinking of that scene when he's introduced to Will Smith,
Yeah,
and they're just, and Will Smith is constantly making like
Short
amputee jokes, and he's constantly making black jokes, and it's just like, man, this is a movie.
How nice of you to join us tonight and add color to these monochromatic proceedings.
Well, when a fella comes back from the dead, I find that an occasion to stand up, to be counted.
Miss East informs me that you were expecting to see General McGrath here. Well, I knew him years ago, but I haven't seen him in a coon's age.
Well, I can see where it'd be difficult for a man of your stature to keep in touch with even half the people you know.
Well, perhaps the lovely Miss East will keep you from being a slave to your disappointment.
Well, you know, beautiful women, they encourage you one minute and cut the legs out from under you the next.
Right. Excuse me, Mr. West?
Oh god, that's a movie that we should discuss at some point. I don't know why. Why is that is that on the list?
Wasn't that on like one of the like 2000? Isn't that like 2001 or something?
No, that's 1999.
Okay, 99. Okay.
That might be on a Gonzo blockbuster list.
Probably.
That has to be on a list somewhere.
That movie definitely. There's things to say about that movie. Beyond Selma Hayek being a fresh breath of ass. I'm pretty sure that's the line.
I told you she'd be a distraction.
She's not a distraction. It's nice having her on board. She's a breath of fresh ass.
Pardon me?
What?
You said ass.
No, I didn't. I said it's nice having her on board. She's a breath of fresh air.
Let's just get some shut ass.
Oh my god, that movie.
I can bet there probably won't be a lot of Tenet discussions until when this comes out. There'll be some, but we're kind of ahead of the pack. But I would bet none of them are bringing up Wild Wild West.
No. God, Kenneth Branagh's career's all over the freaking place. Yeah, Tenet. I don't know. I guess there's only there's only one other thing I want to bring up with this movie, but it's a minor quibble. But is there anything else that you have to say?
Yeah, I had one more minor thing, and I did want to mention, because I know I've said it before, and it's something I definitely kind of hold still. I really dislike the concept, or which I would call the trope, the cliche of, in time travel movies, it was us all along, which is one of my problems with Interstellar. Yeah. I have to say, I did not mind it as much in this movie, because the revelation that it was them all along kind of comes halfway through it, when he inverts himself and they have to go back to the airport hangar and, fight himself and stuff like that. So I think this movie handled it in a little better of a way, and I think I was also blinded by how bonkers it was, that I was just along for the ride, and I was like, fine, there's so much other cliche stuff in here and just nonsense that I'm on board. But I have to mention the worst line of the film, which might be one of the worst lines I think I've ever heard in anything, movies, music, TV shows, whatever, when our protagonist Robert Pattinson and Elizabeth Debicki are like traveling on the boat back to the Freeport to go to the turnstile to undo her after she's healed. Robert Pattinson is explaining what the algorithm is going to do. And remember, everybody, the algorithm is a device. And he's like explaining how it's going to destroy the world. And I think before he says that, John David Washington is like, it's so what's going to happen? Like, what does that mean when he, inverts, more than is non-inverted? And Robert Pattinson is like, it's going to end the world. Like, time will stop. And Elizabeth Debicki goes, will my child die too? And I'm like, what the fuck?
Everyone and everything that's ever lived, destroyed instantly. Precise enough?
Including my son.
Why? Why did that need... We understand she needs to get back to her kid. We understand that's her goal. But what the hell, bitch, do you think your son is some, interdimensional being that if the universe ends, he's gonna still live on? That was the worst thing I think I've ever heard. Period.
It's funny you mention that, because now I'm starting to realize this has a lot of I know you and I were talking a couple weeks ago about time being a major thing with all of Nolan's films.
Oh yeah,
but he's also starting to have a lot of weird hallmarks about we were behind it all along. Mm-hmm. The idea of someone trying to get back to their children.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that was. I guess Inception, then Interstellar, not Dunkirk, but definitely
even The Prestige. You could even say maybe has that element of like getting back to your children, or just like the family, like getting back to your family.
Yep. Speaking of time, that's the whole premise of Memento is time. And that it was us all along, he is Sammy Jankis or whatever the revelation is, and Joey Pantoliano's the bad guy. It's all that stuff. Yeah, he sticks to these themes, like you were saying earlier, whether or not he has anything else to say, he sticks to some of these things.
Yeah, that's, oh God, Christopher Nolan's in, I guess it's that thing that what Tarantino's in, revisionist history. It's just, they found a one would say a groove, others would call a rut.
Sure.
And they're just sticking in it.
Yep. Even the end of The Dark Knight, Jim Gordon's kid is held hostage.
Yeah, getting back to your family. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even the end of Dark Knight Rises, you could even say, because they bury, quote unquote, Bruce Wayne with the rest of the Waynes. Like you could even make that argument.
Sure.
And getting back, it's and even with Talia al Ghul and Ra's al Ghul.
Yep.
That's a weird theme in all these movies.
Yeah, you're not wrong. You are not wrong. I guess Insomnia is the one without that, but Insomnia definitely has...
That was so early.
Yeah, that does have the notion of time, but in the different way of that, it's always day, because they're in some place in Alaska, and they're in the season where the sun doesn't set, and so there's Al Pacino can't get a sense of what time it is. Like, there's scenes where he's like, let's go interview this kid at the school, and they're like, it's 10 o'clock, and he goes, I know, and they go, no, 10 p.m., and it's still bright out, and so he never knows what time it is, and so, yeah, it's time or children. Or both.
Goddamn movies. Movies are horrible.
So yeah, I think that was my last minor thing, was that if the world ends, will my child die? Oh God, I hate that shit. That was so dumb. Elizabeth Debicki was fine in this movie, being one of the 4 women, but that was just no good.
Yeah.
So what was your minor thing?
It's not really minor. It's more I think about it, but it's like halfway through the movie, they start inverting time, and you have to wear an oxygen mask.
Oh, yes.
Because apparently you'll suffocate on air going backwards.
Yeah, they said, I think military explainer lady says something like, forward moving oxygen won't go through inverted lung membrane or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And so you take a sound mixing that's horrible, and you combine it with covering everybody's mouths with a plastic apparatus.
Yes, that was a weird choice.
What's Christopher Nolan's things with covering actors' mouths with devices?
Yeah, maybe that's the third one, to go with time and children, and specifically he likes to do it whenever Tom Hardy's there, right? I guess not in Inception. But Bane, and then for most of the movie of Dunkirk, he's got the aviator's mask on.
Yep. And the thing that makes that worse, beyond just the fact that you really couldn't hear the actors at that point, and if he wanted to have that plot element of they need oxygen, they could have had it so instead of it covering the entire mouth, it just goes directly into their nostrils.
Yeah.
And you could let their mouths be open. Nope, we need to cover their entire face. It's kind of like the opposite of Tarantino with feet. Nolan needs to have people's faces covered. It's the opposite of that. What's the opposite of a fetish?
That's a good question. A distaste?
I guess it's a fetish for covering people's faces?
Yeah. It's a fetish it's an inverted fetish.
Inverted fetish. There we go. We figured it out. We got it. We figured it out.
So speaking of that, when he has to we learn he has to put the mask on because our main character inverts himself. That whole scene after the initial car chase, when they go to the docks where Sator is, and they do that, they have that weird mirror kind of room set up type of thing. And, one side of the room is going forwards, one side is going backwards, and you're hearing audio go forward, dialogue going forward, dialogue going backwards. This deserves an award from me personally for being one of the times in my life that I was literally confused beyond belief. I had no clue what was happening in that, because I was watching it and I'm trying to parse through what was going forward and what was going backwards, and And then you start seeing all this stuff, and like Elizabeth Debicki gets shot like 3 times in that scene as they're inverting and uninverting themselves. And I was just in awe. Like, I couldn't look away because it sounded and looked really interesting. But I was just like, I have no idea what is going on right now. And then when he inverts himself and goes back to the car chase, and somehow the part of the algorithm, like, pinballs around 65 different objects and ends up in Sator's car, I'm like, I could not explain to you what just happened. And then fire turns to ice, and I'm like, I am so lost, but I need to keep watching it.
It's all right though. Robert Pattinson says, "You're the first person to ever get hypothermia from a car accident."
Yes, and ignorance is our ammunition. Oh, God, this movie, man.
And lying is standard operating procedure.
Oh God, it's a temporal pincer movement. That is my favorite thing from this movie. Just that concept. I like chuckled when the military man shows up out of nowhere and he's like, "This whole operation was a temporal pincer movement," and I'm like, okay. I'm like, you just gave me a phrase that I don't understand, following a whole 10-minute scene I did not understand.
That part where he gives the military briefing, in the red, cargo container, and he's, pointing to the blue cargo container,
Yes.
Halfway across the battlefield. I had no idea what was going on during that.
Oh, I did not either, and I'm pretty sure there's a line in there where he's explaining it, and he's like, "Now see, blue team, they've already had this debriefing." And I'm like, what? And I'm like, what do you mean?
And he's like, "We're using their debriefing to feed our mission."
Yeah,
what?
I'm just... oh, Jesus
and Robert
Christ.
Pattinson's driving a Humvee around the battlefield. He's blowing a horn.
You're seeing so much shit go on, and it like I said, this movie is absolutely goofy and bonkers, and I'm slowly loving it for that, which is a weird thing for me. But
I told you, it all comes down. I could love it for that exact same reason, but it all comes down to intent.
Yes,
if he's doing
right.
this, if this is the Christopher Nolan equivalent of in Transformers. I don't know, one of them, where they're doing an operation. The military has a bunch of monitors, and there's I'm not joking, 30 monitors, and only 4 of them have images, and the rest of them are all blue because they never filled them in. They never filled them in with images. It's just the blue screen that they had on set. If it depends, if he's doing this because he's lazy, then I hate this movie. If he's doing this movie because he genuinely hates the audience, then I love it.
Okay.
That's the difference. Again, if he's doing this because he's just indifferent toward it, filmmaking now, then fine. But I'm not going to like it. If he's doing this because he wants to spend $200 million and shove it up the audience's ass, then I'm fully on board with it.
Fair. I think I would agree with you there that I would like to know the intent for sure. And I think definitely I guess one of my final thoughts is that I would love to see this again to hopefully try and wrap my head around it, see if that's possible. I think that's why I want to see this again. But man, also, there's some visuals in this I really, really loved because I love stuff going in reverse. And so I think that's what kept it going a lot for me. Like I said at the start, I was conflicted because I loved looking at it and seeing it, but man, this is bonkers.
That's the thing. I would love to go see this again. Except I want the subtitle track. I want closed captioning.
You're right. I would love to pick up on those details that I missed. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's weird to say that about a movie, that you want to go see a movie again, not to relive the spectacle, but to be able to actually know what the characters are saying.
Definitely.
And that's something that's easily fixable and was a deliberate choice not to do.
Yeah, good old. I mean, I think we said it even way before Tenet was even in our field of view, that's just what Christopher Nolan, loud noises and terrible mixing.
But he doesn't it's not that pronounced in Interstellar. There's only really one sequence in Interstellar where it's so loud, the mixing, that you can't hear the actors, and that's when Jessica Chastain has figured out whatever the hell they're trying to figure out in that movie.
Okay.
And she has the formula, and she tells Topher Grace, and she throws the paperwork down, and she's talking to him, and he's talking to her, and the sound, this everything is so loud, and the mixing for the dialogue is turned absolutely down. That's really the only time in the entire movie you can't hear dialogue.
Sure, yeah.
Dunkirk, it's at least explainable because within the context of the movie, because it's Christopher Tom Hardy is in a plane, and he's trying to talk to his fellow pilots and like, oh, you might not be able to hear. It's like it makes sense in the context of the film. But like, there's no reason why when like they're having a gunfight that like you should, or not a gunfight, like they're just having like a stroll down the street, and like the soundtrack and the ambient sound is dialed up and the dialogue's dialed down.
I think one of the best examples in Tenet is after that opening action scene at the opera house, when our protagonist is captured and he's trying to eat the cyanide pill. There is no reason the trains need to be louder than everything in the known universe.
Yes.
I'm with you there.
other than it was a very selfish creative choice.
Yeah, absolutely. Did I love it because it was loud? Yes. Did I dislike it because I would like to hear more of the dialogue? Yes.
Exactly. And then to bring one last final point to the masks, it drives me nuts the fact that we live in a world where everybody has to wear these goddamn things, and they have to go see a movie where everybody's face is covered. See, that's how Christopher Nolan knows he's from that's how I know he's from the future. See, that's the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
He knew.
All right. Well, is that all you have on Tenet? I think that's all I got.
I think that's all I got.
Okay.
I guess that's okay, I have a very particular spin I want to give on the late night movie thing.
Oh, okay. So before we get to our questions, I'll put it in here. Since Justin could not make it, he was planning on being in this main discussion, but he has expressed some interest to at least give a little bit of his thoughts. And if he does, I will drop it in here. This is a temporal pincer movement. Rob has the knowledge of what Zack and I just talked about, but Justin does not. And guess who's here with us? It's Justin. Are you here with us? Are you going reverse? Did you go through the turnstile? What the fuck is happening in this movie? Can you tell us, Justin?
Oh, man. Yes, I am here. I am here with us, and I am reversed.
I am so glad that we get to have your opinion, because earlier in this discussion, later, earlier, forward, backwards, who knows, for anybody listening to this audio file, they know that Rob has already described how he saw this movie with Justin, and while Justin could not make the main discussion, he wanted to get him in here, through turnstile or not, to discuss his thoughts. and there's some kind of top-line items, I think, with this temporal pincer movement of a discussion that we're doing in this Cinemoddities episode. I'm going to ask Justin some of the top-line items that we had, Zack and I had, about this movie or this episode. So first and foremost, if you can answer it, Justin, do you have a favorite Christopher Nolan movie? Do you know who Christopher Nolan is? Are you aware that you're being recorded right now?
Do you exist? Oh, gosh, a favorite Christopher Nolan movie?
I think I have to say, while Justin, maybe you can think about this, I think the last 2 or 3 times I've told Justin that I really like Memento, that's one of my favorite Christopher Nolan movies, his response has been, that was Christopher Nolan?
Yeah, I didn't realize it was Christopher Nolan. I've also never been able to stay awake through that whole movie, so I've got to give it a watch.
I think you said the same thing about, like, The Dark Knight. When I was like, I love The Dark Knight, and you were like, that was Christopher Nolan?
Yeah, I didn't realize that was Christopher Nolan either.
This is through text, so our audience knows. This is me and Justin texting each other, and I'm sitting in my apartment going, who the fuck did he think directed these movies?
I don't really think about directors a whole lot.
So do you just want to, we won't get into full detail, but would you like to just say that you suck the dick of Interstellar and we move on? Is that fair?
I think Interstellar is one of my top choices for favorite.
Yeah, that's Zach's favorite. I hate both of you with a passion. Forward or backwards time.
Inverted or normal. Don't let me drive a car.
Yes. So with we started with that. Zach and I started with favorite Christopher Nolan. We did a little talk of Christopher Nolan's filmography, that type of thing. But getting into the more pertinent information, before we get into Tenet in and of itself, we need to talk about the concept, Justin. We went to a movie theater in 2020.
We went to the movies and we're alive. Do you feel like you have COVID? I don't feel like I have COVID.
Yes, we are. I'm pretty sure I said it maybe at the time our audience is listening to this an hour and 57 minutes ago. I have no sense of smell. My sinuses are destroyed. Zach and I are dying from COVID. Are you in the same boat? Have you died because you went to a theater, Justin? In all seriousness, can you just give us your thoughts on going back to a theater for this movie? Not about this movie in general, but how did you feel leaving your house to see a movie?
It's weird. I mean, just leaving the house in general in COVID, there's always that paranoia, which sucks. Because I always like the summertime because I can just leave my house. I don't have to worry about a jacket. I don't have to worry about getting cold. I can just go outside and it's great. Now, I've got to worry about getting COVID and potentially killing someone or dying. So it's always like unsettling. And the movies were the same way in that I'm constantly just like trying not to touch stuff. You know, putting on the hand sanitizer. So that was just kind of weird. Although there were a few things that were awesome about it. Namely, nobody was there. So there, you know, we didn't have to deal with people. That movie theater we went to is normally pretty busy. And there were 0 lines. We walked up, got a beer, easy peasy. Yeah, we ended up getting a free beer.
Can you tell Heather to shut the fuck up unless she wants to come on this recording? I don't want to have to deal. I can't edit out background noise.
Have to edit you out. So
I'm just imagining Heather is doing a frowny face right now. I'm sorry, Heather.
She did a frowny face. Rob said he's sorry. He imagined you were doing a frowny face.
So you bring up a good point, Justin, where we showed up a little bit early. Because when we talk about movies, Zack and I, who are still, even in this day and age, the primary people talking on Cinemoddities, we used to show up to movies like an hour and a half before. We must have showed up to this movie, 20 minutes early? And there was nobody there.
Nobody was there. There were no lines. We were the first people in the theater.
We were. Zack would be proud. Zack is right now, I think for our audience, he's going through a turnstile to make it to Monstober. But we were early. We got our stuff. We made our seats. And I remember saying to you, Justin, if nobody else shows up, this is going to be the greatest movie-going experience of my life.
Yes, that would have been awesome.
But
people did show up, and we had to wear masks.
Well, that's the thing. I guess, did you wear a mask, Justin?
I was eating popcorn the whole time, so I wasn't required.
I
wore
was
a
eating
mask
peach
for
rings
like 5
the whole time.
minutes.
We talked about this in the main recording that, I had candy on my lap no matter what, so I did not wear a mask at all.
Yeah. I mean, we were so far from everyone, too. Like, we were really socially distanced.
Yeah.
If I was getting up or if people were walking by me, I would have put a mask on. But no, we didn't cross within like 10 plus feet of anyone.
Yeah. Zack got into that a little bit with his movie-going experience. I don't want to rehash that stuff. I think, for all intents and purposes, Justin and I and Heather went to the movies. We saw this movie in theaters. That's a huge deal for this day and age. And I think that brings us to the big question, the main question, before we get into any of these little nitty-gritty details and topics I want to discuss with you, Justin. I would like to give you the floor. Overall thoughts on Tenet. Justin, please, just feel free to unleash on our audience. How did you feel about Christopher Nolan's 11th film, Tenet?
I thought the movie was great. Hold on, I'm sorry. But Heather,
that is the worst way to start this.
Yeah, we're going to have to... Sorry, Heather's writing me notes on a napkin. Just let me record.
Heather
if you
can
want to
talk
be on the podcast,
as long as she's not talking while you're talking.
If you want to be on the podcast, you can do this.
I will take Heather's thoughts. You both know I get to edit this later.
Okay with your thoughts. Okay. Heather wants you to know it felt more safe than the grocery store. Those are Heather's thoughts.
Can Heather say that to the microphone? Because I'm
okay,
not.
Heather,
I'm literally not going
audience.
to edit that into.
It felt more safe than going to the grocery store.
Okay, all right.
God,
she's good now.
This episode comes out in fucking 7 hours, and I have so much editing to do based on 20 minutes of talking to you.
Just cut out like the last 30 seconds.
So, Justin,
okay, all right.
What thoughts do you have overall? I'm talking anything. I'm talking you just one-sided rant about Tenet. What did you think? That's what we're listening for.
Overall, I thought the movie was great, and it was a lot of fun watching. I love time travel, period. I always love time travel. I pretty much like any movie, any TV show involving time travel, unless it sucks. So you've got to try really hard to mess up time travel in my book. But Nolan went above and beyond with this whole inverted idea because it was completely new. Like, he took time travel. He did all the usual tropes about, it was us all along. You can't change the past. What about paradox, grandfather's paradox, all of that stuff? He did it, but simply by introducing the idea of inverting time and going backwards while everything else is going forwards, he just really found a way to just refresh and spice up just the time travel genre. So I thought that was fun and super intriguing the whole movie. It was also confusing as hell. This movie was so hard to follow because time travel is...
Can I just interject? Justin, I love everything you just said because your opinion is what we're looking for. I want our audience to know, like Rob... Zack and Justin have never had any discussion together. I am the mediator between these two. That take that you just had is fantastic, but I have to say, I think we share a very similar sentiment about one portion of the movie that I talked about a lot in the discussion leading up to this between Rob and Zack. And this is why we get to do this, because Rob and Zack and Justin are all in turnstiles. We're going forward, backwards. Who knows what the fuck is happening this episode of Cinemoddities. After the car chase in Tenet, when they go to the docks and they have the people on those fucking two-way mirrors... I guess, Justin, the way I want to phrase it...
The first time they get into the turnstile room.
Is there any way, shape, or form for a human to understand what is going on in that scene?
Not on a first watch.
Not on a first watch, thank you. That's what I'm looking for. We are
oh my God.
fucked
Not in the
as
moment.
people.
Christopher Nolan intentionally disorients the viewer. And he was... The ambition behind this movie, the fact that he fit so much conceptually into one movie is legitimately impressive. And he did it well.
Fair.
The execution was fantastic. But yeah, no, there were so many things that are just ridiculously hard to follow in this movie. And I tried really hard. I'm like, okay, time travel, shit's moving backwards. This guy's moving forward. He's moving backwards, which is why this is happening. But, bro, he does not stop just layering it on and just adding more and more in every goddamn scene. So as soon as you think you get it, you're like, all right, bullets can go backwards. Easy. They go back into the gun. No problem. I'm with you, and then it's, some normal investigative work for a bit in the movie. And it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm tracking. I can't understand half the words you're saying because your accent's so thick and this movie's so goddamn loud. But... for the most part, I'm following. And then he's just like, nah, you're done. Now everything can move backwards. Who's moving backwards? Who's moving forwards? Crazy car chases. Oh, God, it's insane. You watch every scene like twice. There hits a point in the movie where you just start rewatching scenes that you've already seen because it's like, guess what? Somebody's going backwards now, and you're watching it from their perspective. It was crazy. It was a lot of fun, really intriguing, but also just completely batshit crazy and super hard to follow.
Dude!
I never hit a point where I was like, I understand the backwards shit. Like, I just never was just, okay, that's inverted, so what I'm seeing makes sense. It just literally... By the end of the movie, it made less sense because they just have I'm sure you talked about it, but they just have this huge battle where there's squads that are inverted and people are, fighting and cooperating with their inverted selves. And it's just a friggin' huge war scene. And there's no following that. There's literally no following. Not to mention the strategy behind what they're doing and why they're doing it. And then they'll have like these intense discussions while someone in the scene is inverted, like picking a lock, and there's crazy dialogue with it's overwhelming. The amount of visual content and just the amount of dialogue that's happening at the same time. I mean, it was awesome. I want to watch it like 5 times so I can feel like I actually understand everything, but that's what it's going to take. Multiple views easily. So yeah, I loved it. It was a great time. Very disorienting.
So, Justin, you mentioned it in that diatribe you just gave about the movie, which was greatly appreciated. What were your thoughts? Because I know I talked about it in reference to Zack. Zack saw it in IMAX. We did not. We saw it together, sitting literally next to each other. What were your thoughts on the sound mixing, the sound editing, the dialogue versus noise, all that stuff?
Dude, I don't think I've ever seen a louder movie. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that even comes close to being as loud as this goddamn movie. I don't know if the people operating the theater just made a mistake and turned the dial up a bit too high, or if that was intentional. Heather was literally covering her ears, and I was close to doing the same at parts of this movie. And Heather even said it. She's like, "That there's a scene where there's a railroad that drives a rail car that goes, and oh my god, it's actually louder than an actual train."
Okay.
And the action was impeccable. I mean, I loved the action scenes in this movie. They were, high budget, crashing planes, crashing cars, large scale battles, buildings crumbling.
Nice.
Man, as for the action category, this gets a big check plus. Because it is an excellent action movie.
Okay, so Justin is
coming. On
coming.
top of being so conceptually intriguing, the
Justin
action's on point.
Justin is coming from where I am coming from in our main discussion. That I think that the action, the visuals, is the main point of this movie.
Yep.
And I think that it succeeds in that extent. So
absolutely.
For some deeper thoughts or maybe some more intrinsic details about this movie. There are two things I'd like to bring up to you, Justin, that Zack brought up. One of them, which I'm really interested to get your thought on, is that Zack made an interesting comparison. Because, of course, don't forget, everybody, this is a temporal pincer movement. I got the knowledge that
style.
Justin doesn't have. Yes, temporal podcast movement right here. Zack made an interesting comparison between Tenet and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Because immediately... think about the fact that both of these movies are the most recent films from the possibly only two directors we have left in Hollywood that are held in high esteem. Christopher Nolan and Quentin Tarantino. We've seen now both of these movies in theaters, Tenet and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. These are the most recent films from high esteemed directors, Christopher Nolan with Tenet and Quentin Tarantino with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Do you have any comparisons or any thoughts on which one you like more or liked better? Or do you think that they are incomparable? This was a big part of Zack and I's discussion on the concept of, well, once a director has enough clout, whether it be Tarantino, a lot longer, or Christopher Nolan, since the break of the 2000s, they both have that standing. How do you feel about two films from these directors that we've now seen in theaters? Do you think that there's a difference between a giant war battle at the end of Tenet or a fat Leonardo DiCaprio saying, if you want to smoke weed in a dark road, fix your fucking muffler at the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
I thought they were so similar. I'm probably going to be confusing scenes from the two.
Oh, nice. Nice. I like that take.
Yeah, Leonardo DiCaprio. Right. Yeah, he was in Tenet. People are going to be like, no, he wasn't, Justin. I'd be like, oh, but Brad Pitt was, right?
He's the one who tripped the device when they were going to the algorithm at the end. And it's like, no, he was just making margaritas for the last 20 minutes of that movie.
Robert Pattinson, he was a stunt actor, right? In Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. No, Justin, that was Brad Pitt. Oh, fuck, right.
Robert Pattinson fought Bruce Lee in the middle of that movie. No, but in all honesty, with that idea now being presented to you, what do you think about, I think this is a big concept that we need to talk about at this day and age, especially with how infrequently, I should say, movies come to theaters, big directors with big movies, and we've seen both of them in theaters. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, one, I was able to stay awake during both of them, which is big kudos because, I mean, we all know it's really hard to stay awake during a movie. So props to both of them. I think it's really interesting, the idea of can you compare these and how can you compare them? Because they're so friggin' different. I mean, sure that there's some action in both of them, so that's a similarity. And I think they both did fight scenes really well, but they approach them from completely different angles.
Yes.
And what they're doing in these films is night and day. I think they both execute what they were trying to do fantastically.
Well, I have to ask you, because of course we saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood first. That was the movie that came out prior to Tenet.
Mm-hmm.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the ending of it is revisionist history. It is saying, what if the Manson murderers did not attack Sharon Tate's house? What if they attacked Leonardo DiCaprio's house, whatever character he was?
While he's tripping on acid.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But the comparison becomes, as I start to think that these are different, I kind of think that they are the same. Because if you describe Tenet with a phrase, wouldn't it be revisionist history, but in the short term? Aren't our main characters trying to change the path of time?
No, because what's happened, Rob. They are just doing their destiny and fulfilling it. The main character wants to change.
I think that Robert Pattinson says otherwise in the end. He says what happened is a fantastical idea of saying that, we need to just be along with the universe's touches. And the main character says, well, what do you mean by fate? And he says reality. I think this leads us into our next question, and I hate to bleed these two questions into each other, but Justin, do you think there was a message to Tenet? Do you think there was something the audience should gain from this unique version of time travel? Do you think that there was a message to take? And let me put this in perspective. In terms of the Christopher Nolan movies everybody knows and loves, let's talk about Dark Knight. The whole concept of Dark Knight is the faith in humanity. Can we believe in humanity to do the right thing? We move to Inception, and the entire idea of Inception is, can we make people do things by our own will without theirs? And then we moved to Interstellar, a movie that everybody knows I absolutely despise, but that movie is getting at the topic of, can love transcend space and time? And then we move to Tenet. Is there a message to Tenet? Is there something that audiences can gain and learn from watching this fixed point time travel movie? And I'm not trying to say this to you, Justin, in this turnstile discussion we're having about whether or not I think this is yay or nay. I want to get your opinion. Do you think that there is a message to Tenet tying in directly to how does this compare to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, if that makes sense?
Well, that's really hard because I think Tenet, it really stimulates your brain in the sense that it makes you think, and it provides so much food for thought.
Well, does it stimulate your brain in concept or in theoreticism? Because yes, the concept is stimulating, that we are dealing with a unique form of time travel that deals with fixed points. That is, as far as I'm concerned, that has never been done. When time travel happens, we can go back, do whatever the fuck we want. But this is fixed point time travel. That is interesting. But beyond that, beyond a plot concept, is there anything this movie is saying? Did you learn anything from this movie?
No, I don't think I did. Like I said, it's mentally stimulating, but, it's kind of classic, like, don't try and end the world shit. Classic action movie shit.
I agree with you. I want to push back a little bit on, you said it was mentally stimulating. Are you sure that you're not are you confusing that with visually stimulating?
No, because I'm just thinking so hard about the idea of going back in time and how that works. Like, well, if this car's going back in time and it hits this car, then does that mean there should be a chip in the rear view mirror? And then at the end we find out, the main character had set up the entire events of the whole movie, and he's kind of been running the show. And so then I'm thinking about, wait, so this guy had to go back in time to years before the events of the movie, which means he had to be going reverse for like 5 years? What did he do for 5 years in reverse? That to me is like mentally intriguing.
Would you say that this movie sets up temporal questions that don't have answers but are interesting to think about?
Yeah, and that's what all time travel movies do, which is why I like them, because they are so intriguing to think about.
I'm glad you say that, because I think that was a big thing that Zach and I discussed, is that is where my divide comes from Zach's thoughts, is that this is, even though it's time travel in a unique way, and I want to get your opinion, this is why I'm explaining, I want to get your opinion on it, Justin. I think this is time travel in a unique way that is goofy enough for me to love it, where Zach thinks it is time travel in a unique way that is saying fuck you to the audience.
No, I loved it. I thought it was really interesting. You know, time travel never makes sense. Right?
It can't make sense.
I mean, you know, we could have an argument that could time travel happen? And that's why there's, you know, various kinds of time travel throughout media.
Yep.
Right? You can change the past, you can't change the past. Parallel universe type ideas.
Grandfather paradox, as we get
grandfather
in this movie.
paradox. Yep. And so movies just, you know, every universe with a time travel possibility just sets up the rules, and then it has to follow those. Does it make sense for our world? Well, we don't know, because we can't time travel, so we don't know what it'd look like. You know, and just thinking about the fourth dimension is always fun, right? Because, I can move anywhere I want in the first, second, third dimension, you know, X, Y, Z, easy, no problem. But the fourth dimension is fixed, and it only moves in one direction as far as we know. Mm-hmm. So the concept of navigating the fourth dimension differently is just really interesting, how that work. But we don't know if it's possible, right? From our current understanding of physics and the universe, we don't know if there is any way to navigate it differently, and if you could, what that would look like.
Yeah, fuck you, Rob.
Can I just say, Heather, before we saw this movie, Heather and I cooked up a goddamn feast.
Oh my god, it was so good. We had leftovers for days.
Dude, that fucking leftover. Okay, so we made chicken cordon bleu.
Which I think it got better the longer it sat in its own juices.
Dude, I love that shit. You gave me 3. Heather left me with fucking weird bags of food after this movie.
We ran out of Tupperware. I don't know what the fuck happened to all my Tupperware. And so I just sent Rob home with like Ziploc baggies full of like mashed potatoes. It was so disgusting looking.
Heather and I made chicken cordon bleu, mashed potatoes, asparagus with a lemon butter sauce, and acorn squash.
Oh my god, it was so fucking good.
And then we saw Tenet, and our eardrums got damaged.
Yes, they did. They did get damaged.
I think Heather, overall, thoughts on Tenet. What did you think about 1, seeing a movie in theaters, and 2, this movie?
Okay, can we... For some reason, I just want to skip to 2. So the movie, I just want to go like behind the scenes and really figure out how the fuck they filmed it. Like, did they teach people how to walk backwards, or did they somehow overlay the movie? Like, overlay the film? Like, how many green screens were involved? I have no idea, but... That's like the most fascinating part about the entire movie, was how they were able to film it and piece it all together. It was really cool. And like even the sound and stuff too. Like, yeah, there were some sound bites that were, I couldn't tell if they were being played backwards or just multiple ones being played over each other. But I would really like them to do like an hour long show about behind the scenes of filming this movie.
Nice.
Justin says there will be, but we'll see.
You have a great podcast voice, Heather. I think I've told you this before.
Thank you. It's perfectly raspy from all the dabs I've been doing.
Oh my god. Zach and I did like 2 hours and 20 minutes, and now I think we're going on an hour. I don't. This is gonna be amazing. This is gonna be so. With that being said, I think the last thing I would like to ask you while I have you here, Heather, is do you think this message? Do you think this movie had a message? Did you gain something from this movie? Did you feel anything, or did you think it was just spectacle?
I think he was just purposefully trying to mind fuck you in like a super serious kind of jokingly way.
Okay, good.
Does that make sense? Like it was completely like he was being serious, but also the whole idea in of itself was kind of, sarcastic because it's all hypothetical. But he was trying to be super serious about it. And Denzel Washington's son was amazing as the lead.
Nice.
Yes.
Good answer. So I am going to edit out everything Justin said and just put you in, and we're going to be good.
We all know that I'm filled with the quality content, not just.
So on the same topic, something that will definitely get edited out. Heather, have you used those peppers I gave you yet? All right. So with that all being said, we can get to our questions, and we'll start with Cinemoddities and Late Night. I know, Zach, you said you have a pretty specific spin on Late Night. I think that mine, I don't really have too much to say about this. I think, you can clarify, of course, but we've been saying I find this as a definite Cinemoddities. I think for every reason we've discussed. I've never seen anything quite like it. So visually engaging, but so absolutely goofy and scientifically immature is probably a way to put it. I think this is a Cinemoddities movie. And we'll have to talk about that kitchen scene when we get to our snacks for sure.
Yes.
As far as Late Night for me, I was kind of torn. I think this is like the Omega level know your audience. Because once this movie makes its rounds, like I could definitely see putting this on a late night movie because someone is like, oh yeah, I want to see it, Christopher Nolan. Once this movie has made its rounds and people have seen it, if you haven't seen this, I think that there's a lot of people who will just check out from this movie fairly quickly. Once Science Lady starts dumping stuff on us, like if you're not into that, you're not going to sit through another 2 hours, 15 minutes, I think. So I'm going know your audience on Late Night. Also, I don't know how I feel about, I have said in the past that, sometimes, late night movies you can like put on and like start to fall asleep to, like it'll wind the night down. This is one of those things that you might fall asleep and then you might wake up in a cold sweat because some noise was so loud that you thought a bomb went off. Like you might think someone's breaking into your place.
You might wake up to Kenneth Branagh spraying you with saliva.
Yes, exactly. So that's what I'm going with. So Zach, for the first time in a long time, what are your thoughts on Cinemoddities and Late Night?
I think you phrased it perfectly. I want in the spreadsheet as quote a Cinemoddities movie.
Perfect.
End quote. With a capital C. Because this truly is, like, even as I was watching it, the idea of going backwards and forwards, considering that's been a focal point of the podcast since its inception, pardon the pun, you have, without a doubt, that alone gets it in there. Never mind all the Vernon Chapman, Christopher Nolan, Rob and Zack nonsense about it, inversion, all that. That alone gets it in there. Yeah, it's a Cinemoddities movie. It truly is. And then you have my own personal reasons, kind of a little bit different from Rob's, where I think it's a film that's either made with apathy or extreme cynicism. Mm-hmm. As for Late Night movie, I disagree with Rob. I don't think this film's going to make the rounds because of the times that we're living in.
Okay.
I think this film is going to be, because it's not a widely accessible film. It's not an Avengers Endgame. I think it's going to be a cult classic. I think there's going to be I don't think people are going to latch on to this movie the same way they latched on to Inception. I think at best it'll be in the same realm as like an Interstellar, but I don't think it's as accessible to normies as an Interstellar. So I think it's always going to be the weird like time reversal movie.
Okay.
So I think it's going to be more cult classic. I don't think this is going to be anything widespread.
Sure.
But my spin on Late Night movie is that, considering that we're living in very unique times, this is my take on it. I'm going to ask the audience, considering that there are people out there that are buying into this whole nonsense about this being the end of the world, that if you leave your house, you're going to die. Would you leave the house for this movie? Rob and I left the house for this movie. I saw it. You saw it at night, right, Rob?
Oh, yeah. It was a 7 p.m. showing for me.
Yeah. So like we both saw it as a late night movie. So I think by that alone, it makes it a late night movie. On home video, I don't know. I think this would get people enamored. I think it's not a boring movie. There's too much loud for it to be a boring movie. Yeah. So yeah, I think it works as a late night movie.
There's too much confusion for it to be a boring movie.
That's what I mean. I think, and Rob and I have gone back numerous times with the idea of like a late night movie being a repeat viewing. Mm-hmm. I think the whole idea of Cinemoddities and the late night viewing experience is to expose someone to something. Late night showing should never be rewatching something with somebody.
Fair.
So I think if both people have seen this movie, it would disqualify it, but not because of the movie itself, but more just because of the premise in the framework that I've at least laid out. Whether Rob agrees with that, I don't know. But yeah, I think if someone had never seen this and you put it on one night, I don't think this is a know your audience. I think it could work.
Okay, that's fair.
Because it's weird.
I understand where you're coming from.
It's weird. And if you really want to throw them for a loop, tell them there's no closed captioning. Turn the bass down. It's already down.
Why do my eardrums hurt? That's the point.
At one point, I'm pretty sure I could feel my teeth rattling in my skull. I'm not joking. Like I felt my glasses like this rumbling. I'm like, this isn't real life, is it?
Oh God, that's good. All right. So with that out of the way, that brings us to the restaurant, the snacks. So I was definitely definitely trying to think of snacks for this, and I do have one. It's not really a snack or a food item, but more of an addition to the restaurant, but something that we can incorporate with our employees and customer relationship. But I kind of, I was sitting down and I was thinking, like, how do we involve this movie with the restaurant? How do we get our snacks? And of course, the first thing that comes to mind is how do we
cheese grater?
Well, that's the one that I'm actually works and I'm going to add to the restaurant. But I was thinking of how do we get inversion involved in the restaurant? And as I started to think about this, I got this weird, just like in this movie, this instinctual feeling about the future. I don't know why yet. I can't really nail it down, but I have some gut instinctual feeling that if we involve inversion in the restaurant, this will lead to the cataclysmic implosion of Cinemoddities restaurant. I don't know why. For some reason, I am timid on the idea of inverting or adding any element of inversion to the restaurant. For some reason, I think this is going to cause the universe to end, if you know what I mean. What are your thoughts on that, Zach?
The idea of inversion causing the restaurant to collapse in on itself?
Yes. Do you think that could happen? Or do you have the similar feeling? Or are you just like gung-ho, we're going to invert this, we're going to put a turnstile right at the fucking entrance?
I think it explains how we're able to fund the restaurant.
Okay.
We're sending gold bars to ourselves. I think it explains everything. It's kind of like the word processor of the gods.
When Zack fully turns into Christopher Nolan, he's taking all his riches and sending them back in time to the Cinemoddities restaurant.
To one of the revolving doors is going to be in the Mars 2112 space in Times Square.
Oh man. So yeah, I guess that was my feeling, but I guess that's also my long-winded way of saying that I don't have any good snacks relating to or involving inversion, which I mean, I was trying to think of, but nothing really hit the nail on the head for me. Like the one that came closest, I was definitely thinking of, what if we
cheese grater?
I'm getting to the cheese grater, Zach. There's no inversion in the cheese grater for me. But I was thinking of something like if we could find a way to basically invert foods so a customer would order a food and then they would never get it delivered to them. They would just throw it up and get it taken away from them. That was the thing I was trying to formulate, but I was like, even that, because it would give the customer a negative experience. We would basically force them to throw up a food they hadn't eaten, and but nothing really came together. So I don't know. I'm timid on the idea of inversion. Do you want to hear my cheese grater thing now, Zach? So the cheese grater in Tenet, the cheese grater does not get inverted. There is no point at which the cheese grater is inverted. So I wasn't even thinking of those two. In the movie, though, when our main character is fighting through a kitchen, he attacks somebody with a cheese grater. He attacks one of Sator's goons with a cheese grater, which is a great moment. I think that, Justin and I were chuckling about that for sure, because it's so goofy and it's just a little action piece. So my thought was, whenever we have customers that get so angry that they like want to assault or attempt to assault our employees, we have like our employees equipped with a cheese grater, just like the Jizzles, that they can fight the customers off with. And it's kind of like their protection, you know? That's how I was thinking. We want to train, maybe not train to keep it a full Cinemoddities form. We just give our employees cheese graters to basically like use as, you know, weapons or brass
It's
knuckle
part of the
type of
uniform.
things.
It's part of the uniform.
Yeah, like it's on a carabiner or something on their belt, and they can just kind of, you know, zip it away from their waist and slash somebody in the face and say, you know, get back, vile customer. But those are only my two things. I was so hung up on inversion, and I feel that, you know, I might be calling it right now, that when Cinemoddities comes to a full end, like, you know, when Zack and Rob are both gone, it's because we have inverted the restaurant into a different dimension. What did you think? What did you think for snacks in the restaurant?
Oh, I completely forgot about a bunch of there was more stuff that made this even more Cinemoddities oriented, to make it even further a Cinemoddities movie. We forget that there's a scene in a restaurant with Michael Caine, and he orders a meal. Remember that? And like the maitre d' is like really like almost like, oh god, goofishly like cartoony.
Yeah,
it's like talking down to our main character. Then like Michael Caine's like eating his thing, and it's like, what is going on?
And then you're right. I totally forgot because the protagonist is like, I'll have the same order that he's having, and the maitre d's like, I'll bring a menu, and he goes, no, just I'll get the waiter. And he goes, no, just relay the order. And then when they're done, the order comes out, and he's like, can you box that up for me? And he goes, absolutely not.
That's what that was the first thing. I'm like, oh, that's a perfect idea for the Cinemoddities restaurant.
That is good.
We don't let people box out their food. So like, we're like, people say, can I get a box for that? Absolutely not.
Okay. I dig it.
And then the other one is that we have the Kenneth Branagh dinner party.
Oh, yes. The Bond villain introduction moment.
Yes. And we have a part where Kenneth Branagh gets mad and tells John David Washington that we're going to sit there, slit your throat, cut your balls off, and stuff them into your throat and watch you suffocate on your balls.
How could I forget about that moment? That was... I'm pretty sure there's a line from Sator where he's like, do you know how satisfying it is to watch one of your enemies...
choke on their balls.
And then I think he even says something like, it's so satisfying to watch a man try to remove his own balls from his throat as he dies.
Mr. Sator. Don't bother. Just tell me if you've slept with my wife yet.
No. Not yet.
How would you like to die?
Old.
You chose the wrong profession. There's a walled garden up the road. We're going to take you there, cut your throat. Not across in the middle like a hole. Then we take your balls and we stuff them in the cut, block the windpipe.
Complex.
It's very gratifying to watch a man you don't like try to pull his own balls out of his throat before he chokes.
Is this how you treat all your guests?
We're finished.
It is something really fucking goofy.
Yes.
Okay. So what?
I'm starting to think now that Christopher Nolan, this is cynicism on his part, because I can't imagine this in that line of dialogue in any other one of his movies.
And even I think that's the same scene before the ball cutting off thing where he's like, "Tell me, Mr. Protagonist, Mr. No Name, how many times have you slept have you slept with my wife? Not yet." And it's just like, oh my god. She hasn't lathered me down with sunscreen yet.
Oh god, this movie's a mess. Like, it really is.
And it's ridiculous. And
is it a delightful mess?
I kind of think it is. I've come to that on like this past 5 days since seeing it. I've come to find delight in it. I guess is a good way to put it.
Let me rephrase that. Not delightful mess. That's too high of praise. A pleasurable mess.
I would say so. I would say it's pleasurable. A
pleasurable mess.
Yes.
That's going to be my tagline on the poster. A pleasurable mess.
Yes. In a movie that will damage your eardrums.
Oh, yeah.
Make you watch awkward scenes of domestic violence. It's a pleasurable mess.
It gives us a new form. It's the bougie version of the nail through the 2x4. Cufflinks in the belt.
So just when you said the Sator dinner party, so are we gonna serve like cut off balls at the dinner party?
I don't know. That should be some level of experience at the restaurant.
Okay.
Somebody's getting their balls cut off and their neck slit. Whether it's a person, animatronic, I don't know. That has to happen at some point. That's all I'm gonna say.
Oh my god, how could I forget about that line? You are absolutely right. That is perfect.
Now, I think there should be some other dish too, because at one point before we get the cheese grater, we get the meat tenderizer on the cutting board.
Yes.
I think we should have like some sort of dish at the restaurant, like something called fingers, where it's like, I don't know, some sort of appetizer, and they're like, oh, like it's something that sounds normal, but we call it that.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, I'll have that. And what we do is we get like the waiter to come out with another waiter and be like, okay, we're gonna make it for you. They take the meat tenderizer and just start smashing somebody's hand.
Okay, I like that. You got to pulverize the bone so you can consume it.
And you make the flesh, you make the meat tender at that point too.
Yeah. Okay, I like it. So like, I don't know, like when you said, we'll have the waiter come out with somebody else.
I don't know. I think it might be interesting instead of actually maiming one of our employees. Maybe it could be like, maybe it's like a faux hand, and that's how we do it. I don't know. There might be some sort of sleight of hand involved here, pardon the pun. And yeah, I don't know. I haven't figured it out though. But I realize again, the more I think about it, this really is a Cinemoddities movie. Between all the kitchen stuff, the restaurant stuff, the goofiness of the plot devices, the time travel. This might be truly we might have to go back to our what makes a Cinemoddity, or like, and this might be it, but for a completely different reason than Book of Henry is.
Yeah, this might have created like a whole new subcategory.
It's as if Christopher Nolan listens to this podcast, or he recorded this podcast in his youth and would later go on to direct Hollywood feature films.
Yes, exactly. We have no idea. It's like we've been saying a long time. We live in a time vortex.
Yes.
And there's no friends at dusk.
Nope.
Oh God.
And lying is standard operating procedure.
Oh jeez. So I think that we know, Zach and I know how we're going to end this episode. I don't think we should say it. We should just let the audience hear it.
Exactly.
It's going to be perfect. But any last thoughts, Zach, on Tenet, on Cinemoddities, on your return? Are you going back into the turnstile and we won't hear from you again for a while? I think that's the case.
I am going back into the turnstile for Monstober 2020.
Okay.
I'm currently we're actually recording Monstober 2020 right now. I went into the turnstile into the past to record this episode. Now I'm going back.
It's the Cinemoddities movie. You're so right.
It is a Cinemoddities movie. I literally described what we're doing within the context of this movie's terminology. It made perfect sense.
This is absolutely baffling. Well, until the past, Zach, for you and me. But for our audience, until the future. Oh, God, I don't even know how to end.
It's insane.
Are you doing the intro? Are we?
Nah.
Should I do, what do you think?
Let's see if I can get it right. Cinemoddities, late night movies with Rob and Zach. This is a podcast where we discuss any media that is too bizarre, normal, or off kilter for contemporary audiences. Sometimes these projects gel. Sometimes they crash hard into the realm of obscurity. Join us as we delve into the cult classic swamp. I'm Zach. Okay, let's see if I can do it.
That was very close. That was very close.
Oh, what did I get wrong?
You said You said sometimes these projects gel. It's occasionally these projects gel.
Okay, occasionally these projects gel. Sometimes they crash hard into their own. Okay, whatever. I'll figure it out. I'm rusty. I'm allowed to be rusty.
Okay, let me start recording. Make sure it's going.
Are you super duper ultra recording?
It looks like I am.
Woo!
It looks like I am. And now with the 2 channels, like I can just scream while you're talking and edit it out.
Zack's back.
Okay. So yeah, if you do the intro, I'll do my thing, and then I guess I want to go with the we live in a time vortex world.
That's fine. That's however you want to do, Rob. I'm not here to police you.
Okay. Yeah, this is a super duper like ultra special occasion episode for a new movie. This never happens anymore.
I know. All right. Are we Market District Pepper Turkey Breast?
I believe we are Market District Pepper Turkey Breast.
Sweet.